Hey guys! This is part 7 of What If Naruto Met a Legendary Creature. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 14. Results of Training. The wind blew softly through the trees, leaves flowing along the currents. One of the leaves was unable to make it very far unlike its brethren and began to waft slowly and gently to the ground, only to suddenly be sliced in half by the shuriken that was sent hurtling through the air by the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Kakashi caught the shuriken and in one fluid motion, spun on his heels and threw it right back at its user before immediately running through hand signs. Ninpu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. The one shuriken suddenly multiplied and became 30 of the star-shaped weapons. Naruto's blue eyes narrowed as he quickly drew his blade from its sheath and sent a burst of wind nature chakra along its length, increasing its cutting capabilities and sharpness. The hum of the elemental chakra was soft and easily encompassed by the sounds of the approaching storm of steel. However, Naruto immediately shifted into his family's kenjutsu stance. He took a single step forward before lashing out with the blade. Uzumaki Ryu, Hoshi no Roku Pointo Seiryuu. Naruto moved his arms so quickly that the chakra that coated his blade made a visible trail behind it. An upright triangle was formed, followed by the upside-down triangle. The two triangles had intersected to form the six-pointed star that gave the technique its name. Naruto's blade had slashed straight through the hard steel of the shuriken like they were made of hot butter, and they were either sent completely off course or just dropped to the ground, but in the end, all of the shuriken had been neatly bisected. Uzumaki Ryu? Kakashi raised an eyebrow in shock. I haven't seen that since my Ka-chan was still alive. Kakashi's eyes widened as Naruto tossed his kodachi into the air. You found out? In a way I didn't expect to. I chewed out Aokyofu thoroughly for what he did, and also know that you knew as well. Naruto then leaped into the air just as the weapon began to descend back to ground zero. He rotated his body and lashed out with his leg. So I'm going to take this opportunity to vent at you for not telling me. Oh boy. A bead of sweat traversed the side of Kakashi's head as he saw the emotions in Naruto's eyes. The boy would obviously forgive him in the end, seeing as how he most likely forgave Jiraiya. But damn, this was probably going to be a really painful test match. Uzumaki Ryu, Tsubame his hoe! The toe of Naruto's sandals crashed harshly against the base of his kodachi. The kodachi blew forth at amazing speeds as Naruto's kick sent it flying directly at Kakashi. The silver-haired Jounin quickly whipped out a kunai and cloaked it in his own chakra. Chakra flowed across Naruto's body and coated in a cloak similar to how he would have looked in his initial state of using Kurama's chakra, only the aura was blue instead of red. He stamped his foot down as he took his first step, and the ground burst apart as he took off, accompanied by a sound akin to a thunderclap. He moved in a zigzag motion to try and keep his former sensei on his toes. It would have been successful, but the Sharingan was helping immensely with being able to keep track of his fast-moving form. Kakashi quickly bent his knees and stepped forward to get under the attack before performing an upward slash with his kunai, sending the kodachi skyward. However, a spark of lightning marked Naruto's appearance in front of him, and the 16-year-old released a roar as he let loose a strong upward kick. Kakashi gritted his teeth beneath his mask as he was hit against his wrist, making him drop his kunai. Naruto paused as his leg reached straight up into the air and swung it down with tremendous speed, the momentum causing the axe kick to generate a small crater upon making its impact with the ground. Kakashi had gone into a backhand spring to avoid the attack and immediately leaped forward with a knee to the chest. Naruto blocked the attack, but Kakashi quickly slapped his hands over his ears, discombobulating him before spinning around and lashing out with a strong roundhouse kick that nailed him directly in the chest. Naruto was sent careening through the air, but he managed to right himself, digging his fingers into the ground to help stop his movements. Naruto then shot off on all fours, the trail of blue marking his movement. Kakashi kept his Sharingan trained on the fast-moving Chunin and quickly shifted to the side to avoid the wild overhead claw strike. The ground once again cracked from the force, and Kakashi countered with a straight kick to the face. Naruto had went with the momentum of the strike to roll and then push off, nailing a strong headbutt to Kakashi's stomach. The silver-haired man released a gasp of pain as the wind was driven from his lungs, only to then be dealt the onslaught of blows from his former student. A strong right jab hit him in the chest, followed by a left jab. An uppercut was delivered to the chin that sent him off his feet before he was hit with two strong rising kicks to the stomach that had kept sent further into the air. The blonde Jinchuriki then grabbed Kakashi by his ankles before performing a series of front flips to build up momentum. With a roar, he hurled the silver-haired man with terrific force, sending the Jounin rocketing to ground zero. The ground shuddered and quaked as Kakashi made impact with the ground, kicking up a small cloud of dust as well as having him lay within his own personal crater. Naruto then crashed his feet down on top of his former sensei, but Kakashi suddenly exploded into a cloud of lightning. However, due to his training with Kamina, the Raijuu vessel powered through the pain of electrocution as if it was a mere punch to the face. The ground then burst apart as Kakashi's hands went to grab onto his ankles. Naruto had leaped into the air to dodge the attempt to pull him underground before he suddenly reared back his fist, chakra flaring. The blonde Jinchuriki crashed his fist against Kakashi's own when the Jounin had popped out of the ground, and a shockwave was released between the two chakra-empowered blows as they collided. The two shinobi landed on the ground and the Raijuu vessel quickly sped forth, and delivered a series of quick punches. Kakashi easily deflected them aside before grabbing Naruto by the wrist and pulled him in closer. Using his free hand, the Jounin then wrapped his fingers around Naruto's throat before swinging Naruto overhead and choke-slamming him. The ground cracked from Naruto's impact, but the blonde quickly got his former sensei off of him by kneeing him in the ribs. Kakashi leaped backwards as Naruto performed a cat spring, his feet nearly catching the Jounin in the stomach. Naruto then spun on his feet and lashed out with a spin kick, but Kakashi grabbed him by the ankle to stop it before pulling Naruto towards him, grabbing the boy's other foot when Naruto hopped into the air to kick him in the face. However, Naruto suddenly arched his back and planted his hands on the ground. "Up we go!" Naruto shouted as he suddenly swung his caught legs overhead. Earth met the sky to Kakashi before Naruto arched his back and legs further. "And down you go!" He harshly slammed the former ANBU captain into the ground. Kakashi grunted in pain, losing his grip on Naruto's legs in the process. Naruto put himself into a handstand position before bending his arms and pushing himself into the air. The Raijuu vessel then flipped and twisted, raising his leg before swinging it down in a powerful axe kick, but Kakashi had rolled out of the way before pushing himself back to his feet. Brute force isn't working, so let's go with some more precision-based attacks. "Huh!" Kakashi intelligently replied. He watched as Naruto lost his aura of sapphire only to then have the winds swirl around his body, almost as if they were bending to his will, before they became primarily focused around his hands. He shifted his hands and he took a stance that was strikingly similar to the Juken. "Looks like the Hyuga's Juken," Kakashi thought. "Copying other people's fighting styles? Never pegged you for an imitator, Naruto," the Sharingan user commented. "It's not the Juken if that's what your comment is based on," the Kyuubi Jinchuriki replied. He then began to go into a jab with his right hand. The knife-like hand strike was avoided as Kakashi tilted his head, but his eyes widened when a small cut formed on the side of his mask. "Senpuken. My wind chakra is used to sharpen my attacks. With enough skill, I can sever tendons, arteries, and nerves with as much precision as Bachan when she's on the surgical table." Interesting principle. And what about the other one? The one with the aura of chakra? "That would be the Kitsune no Mai," he explained. "It increases my physical capabilities and is a far more brutal style of fighting in comparison to Shippuken. Let me show you." "Nah, I'm good." But Kakashi's words fell on deaf ears as Naruto stepped forward and lashed out with a double strike to the face, but Kakashi stepped into Naruto's guard, hitting him on the inside of his forearms to slap away the attacks before raising his knee to hit the blonde in the groin. Naruto raised his own knee to block it before shifting his body and lashing out with a strong kick. A few strands of silver fell to the ground as an arc of cutting wind had formed from the kick. Naruto then struck with a pair of finger stabs to the chest, and Kakashi quickly crossed his arms and let the metal plates on the backs of his gloves take the blows. He winced when the high-pressure wind blades managed to spear into the metal and graze the backs of his hands. Naruto then smirked as he began to up the ante, his speed increasing with each strike, and Kakashi was beginning to become more and more thankful for Obito's Sharingan. His own arms began to become blurs as he shifted aside all of Naruto's potentially fatal strikes, but due to the inability to completely block the sharp attacks, he was given a few thin, bleeding cuts for his efforts. He's gotten faster. If it weren't for the Sharingan, I would barely be able to keep up with him. The student of the Yondaime quickly parried a left-handed strike to the stomach, but Naruto went with the momentum of the deflection. He spun on his heels to get a bit of momentum before going in for a palm strike to the chest, which Kakashi was about to deflect by preparing to hit Naruto's forearm with his knee. However, Naruto suddenly exploded into a flare of blue chakra, blinding Kakashi slightly due to his Sharingan's enhanced visual prowess. He shifted taijutsu styles in mid-attack. Kakashi realized as blue spots now decorated his field of vision. His raised knee was slammed back down as Naruto's fist struck it, the bone creaking from the force. "Gotcha," he muttered. Naruto stepped into Kakashi's guard and delivered a brutal uppercut to the stomach. A mixture of blood and spittle stained the inside of the Jounin's mask as Naruto's attack struck true. "Yes," he thought with a victorious smirk. He then took another step forward and crashed a strong right hook to the sternum. Time seemed to slow for those who were observing the match before the force of the blow registered with Kakashi's body. He flew through the air at such a speed that he crashed through 3 trees, the pieces of foliage crashing down as their trunks were snapped, before cracking the bark of the 4th tree. "Cor. Whoa!" Sakura exclaimed. "Naruto's actually gotten solid hits on Kakashi-sensei." Fu nodded in approval at her fellow Jinchuriki. "Yup. Goldilocks had a few taijutsu styles, and while he learned a few techniques from them, the 2 he uses now, Kitsune no Mai and Senpuken, are the ones he is more comfortable using. He was always a brawler at heart, so strong blows with Kitsune no Mai were favorite. Though, the Shippuken really brought out his proficiency in his wind chakra. He really has gotten so much stronger," Sakura thought, glancing at the ground. Her fists were clenched tightly as a bit of jealousy seeped into her heart. However, she was knocked out of her thoughts as Naruto's yell resounded throughout the training grounds. "Cor. I'm not done yet, Kakashi-sensei!" Naruto yelled out as he quickly retrieved his kodachi from the area of the training ground it had fallen on. He threw the blade like a spear. "Uzumaki-ryu, Tsubame his hoe!" The wind chakra around the blade sprung to life as it speared through the air, running itself through Kakashi's heart. However, Kakashi suddenly went up in a plume of smoke to reveal a small log. "Kawarimi!" Naruto thought. Naruto appeared before his kodachi and ripped it out of the tree trunk, slicing through it with his wind chakra when he performed a horizontal slice. "Uzumaki-ryu, Kazujiri!" The arc of pressurized wind tore through the air and Kakashi was cut in half at the waist. However, it was revealed to be another Kawarimi as a bisected log appeared in a plume of smoke to take the Jounin's place. Naruto's ears twitched as his senses picked up on movement behind him, and he performed a quick rotation. "Uzumaki-ryu, Enkin!" The flash of blue from his chakra mixed with the silver from the steel of his sword, and a circle of silvery blue light formed around the blonde Uzumaki. However, a resounding clang echoed across the training grounds as Kakashi's kunai blocked the attack. Naruto snarled in annoyance before taking off in a blur of speed and brought his blade down in a downward vertical slash which Kakashi parried. However, as Naruto went into a horizontal slash, Kakashi suddenly found Naruto rolling on the ground, circling around to get to his back before pushing himself to his feet while spinning around rapidly. "Uzumaki-ryu, Shoryu!" His wind chakra flowed to life around his kodachi and a powerful cyclone made of cutting winds swirled to life. Kakashi was sent flying back from the attack and a large horizontal slash now decorated his Jounin vest, while a line of crimson now formed on his chest. The silver-haired Jounin dragged his thumb across the stinging wound and looked up at Naruto with a bit of surprise in his eyes. That surprise then became a look of recognition and pride. You really have improved, Naruto. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. Your parents would be proud to see how you're turning out. Naruto smiled at the praise, but his eyes widened when Kakashi was immediately in his face with a kunai in hand. His kodachi arm snapped upwards and the two blades met with a resounding clang. Bastard! Using my love of praise against me. Vanity can be one's downfall. Plus we're shinobi and we don't fight fair. He highlighted this fact by going for another shot to the groin, which Naruto dodged by shifting to the side. Naruto brought his blade in an upward slash in an attempt to bisect his former sensei, but the silver-haired man charged his arms and kunai with chakra before swinging it down. The kodachi slammed into the ground and a small crater formed from the impact. Naruto pushed himself forward to put his weapon into a vertical position so he could then vault over it, aiming a kick to the face. Kakashi raised his arms and blocked the strike, but he was sent skidding backwards as a result. Naruto went into a forward flip to then wrench his weapon free from the ground. Kakashi and Naruto crashed weapons against each other once more. Good footwork and going with the flow. Thanks. But I wasn't an ANBU captain at 12 years old for nothing, Naruto. Try to keep up. Kakashi's blade blazed with chakra before he and Naruto vanished into blurs of speed. Sparks of orange dotted various parts of the air as the two weapons crashed against one another numerous times. The two finally came to a standstill as Kakashi was pressing his shorter weapon against the middle of Naruto's kodachi blade. Naruto's greater physical strength gave him an edge as he then pushed the silver-haired man back, causing him to stumble. He then went for a stabbing strike to the stomach, but Kakashi quickly stamped his feet down on the ground and regained his footing. Close but no dice, my little student. Naruto's eyes widened as Kakashi stepped to the side of a stabbing strike Naruto had performed. Now let me show you how to disarm an opponent with a kunai. He dragged his kunai along the length of Naruto's blade and then lashed out with a strong kick to the wrist, knocking the kodachi out his hand and then sending it skyward with another swipe of the kunai. No blade, no kenjutsu, he stated. Doesn't mean I can't catch it. Naruto vanished in a swirl of wind and a spark of lightning, easily catching up to his already airborne weapon. He snatched his falling kodachi out of the air and descended to ground zero. Chakra cloaked the weapon before Naruto swung the kodachi down with terrific force as Kakashi raised his kunai in an attempt to block the oncoming attack. Time seemed to slow for both combatants and Kakashi's Sharingan eye rotated slightly. Uzumaki Ryu, Ryusei. Time returned to normal and with a roar, Naruto's attack clashed against Kakashi's kunai, but the steel was no match for a chakra-empowered Uzumaki Ryu technique. The kunai had literally been cut in two and the jounin was given a deep and deadly laceration. Blood sprayed through the air, and to make matters worse, once the technique crashed down on the ground, the chakra then burst out of the tip of the blade and ripped the earth asunder. Kakashi was sent flying through air, pushed along by the chakra burst as a massive trench was left in its wake. A powerful explosion occurred once Kakashi slammed into a tree and a dust cloud formed, accompanied by a shockwave and a massive crater. Once the dust cloud died down, Kakashi was revealed to be bleeding and unconscious in the crater. Naruto sighed before wiping the sweat from his brow, rising back to his full height. Damn, that was difficult, but to think I'd be able to beat Kakashi-sensei. Focus, you hairless monkey. Kurama growled out. What do you mean, Kyubi? I just sent Kakashi-sensei into a crater, so that means it's time for Fu and Sakura-chan too. Naruto paused mid-sentence as he glanced around the battlefield and noticed that Fu and Sakura were nowhere to be seen. It was like they had vanished from existence. His blue eyes blinked owlishly in confusion. The gears turned in his head as he continued to think about what was happening. Warmer, warmer, there you go! Kurama exclaimed, clapping mockingly for his third Jinchuriki. Naruto growled in annoyance before slapping his forehead. Don't mock me. You know I suck at genjutsu on the whole. True, but while your detection is the worst it could be for a person of your skill level, your dispelling methods are by far the best in your generation, Kamina assured his student. Now get out of here. You're wasting time. On it. Kai. He clapped his hands together and flared his chakra. Suddenly the world around him appeared bore spider web-like cracks. the sounds of the word breaking apart before his eyes met his ears before shattering like glass. Naruto's eyes snapped open and he looked to see Kakashi with a kunai to his throat. The blue-eyed Jinchuriki snarled at his former sensei. Now, be a good sport, Naruto. Though you do have Kushina-sama's temper, that doesn't mean you should use it. When did you, just as my attack was about to connect? He spoke as his eyes widened in realization. That's right. Kakashi smiled under his mask. You really have gotten better in every aspect. The old you would never have even known he was in a genjutsu. Fuck you. Naruto replied with a smirk. But it's a shame then that the great Sharingan no Kakashi would be unable to see he's being distracted. Kakashi's eyes widened when Naruto's body began to glow like a shining sapphire. The Sharingan allowed Kakashi to see chakra pooling within the core of Naruto's chakra network. Kage Bunshin. Kakashi realized. Bunshin Daibakuha. The silver-haired Jounin quickly leaped away just as the clone exploded. A massive shockwave had Kakashi tumbling through the air, but he quickly managed to regain his bearings and skidded along the ground. He came to a halt to see the large crater where the Kage Bunshin had been standing before. However, he was given no rest as the ground beneath his feet suddenly cracked. Kakashi took a quick step backwards while raising his kunai. Sparks of orange danced through the air as the original Naruto erupted from the ground with an upward vertical slash. Naruto then twirled the blade between his fingers as he missed to then swing the blade down. Uzumaki Ryu, Kabuto Warema. Kakashi quickly went through hand signs and slammed his hands down on the ground. Doton, Dorihiki no Jutsu. An earth wall rose up just as Naruto's blade came crashing down. The defensive structure took the strike head-on before Naruto quickly spun his blade around in his hand, sparks of voltage racing across the length of it. Uzumaki Ryu, Shigekiha. The shockwave of lightning erupted forth from the tip of the blade and the Doton Jutsu was completely shattered, turning to rubble. It was then that the sound of hissing met Naruto's ears and the blonde shinobi's eyes widened when he took note of the explosive note on the rubble. Shit! He cried out before the explosion rocked the battleground. A massive crater was left behind and the dust cloud dispersed into nothing. Naruto flickered into existence at the edge of the crater. His clothes were slightly singed, but otherwise he was fine. Naruto didn't care about the damage done though, as Kakashi was now holding his sword in his hands. Nice grip. Evenly balanced. Easily capable of making full use of the user's chakra due to these seals written out on the blade. Kakashi spun the blade around in his hands before throwing it through the air where it was embedded into the tree stump Naruto had once been tied to as a genin. You've improved drastically, Naruto. Taijutsu, Kenjutsu and a bit of Genjutsu, you've done well, but now it's time to see how well you stack up in this next test. Ninjutsu time! Kakashi sang before he summoned an earth wall once a bolt of lightning came his way. Raitun, Raikurai no Jutsu. The bolt of blue lightning crashed against the earthen structure with explosive force, spearing through its weaker element like it was made of paper. Kakashi went into a backhand spring as Naruto materialized above him with his fist drawn back, winds swirling to life around the limb. Futon Fujin Saiken. He brought the first down, creating a large crater as the attack made impact. Kakashi recovered and went through hand signs so quickly that his fingers were literally blurred. He came to a stop on the tiger sign before inhaling deeply. Katon, Gakakyu no Jutsu. The massive fireball rocketed from Kakashi's mouth, somehow not burning his mask in the process, careening through the air at a rapid pace. However, Naruto quickly formed a rat sign and a blade of wind materialized around his hand. Futon, Kaze no Yaiba. The wind blade was brought down in a vertical slash, diverting the flames so that they scorched only the earth on either side of him. He then took off at a rapid pace, a dust trail left in his wake before leaping and bringing his foot down in a devastating axe kick. Kakashi raised his arms and blocked the kick, but grunted as he felt the force travel through his body, the ground cracking beneath his feet. He pushed Naruto back before unleashing another fireball, but the blonde Jinchuriki quickly vanished into the wind as he used Kaze Shunshin. As Naruto reappeared on the ground and went through a few hand signs before ending on Tiger. Your affinity for fire isn't your best, Kurama stated. Are you sure you want to try it now? It's one of the best katan jutsu I know. Besides, now's a better time than any to give it an actual combat-tested whirl against Kakashi-sensei in comparison to the exams. His blue eyes blazed with determination before he took a deep breath. Katan, Goka Mekyaku! Kakashi, Sakura and Fu's eyes widened in shock as Naruto exhaled possibly the largest wave of fire they had ever seen. The fire burned the earth black as it traversed the land. Kakashi quickly leaped back and landed atop the surface of the nearby river and went through his own hand signs, moving his fingers as quickly as possible as the fires neared him. Sitten, Daibakufu no Jutsu! The massive explosion of water wasn't able to completely match the size of Naruto's blaze, but it came pretty close. The two high-level jutsu collided with great force, generating a massive cloud of steam that served to completely obscure the combatants from each other. Naruto growled in annoyance as he tried to see through the steam, but his ears were able to pick up on the sound of rushing water. Suetun, Tsuryuden no Jutsu! The waters of the river rose to a massive height, swirling into the shape of a powerful water dragon. The serpent of liquid had its yellow eyes trained on the Kyubi Jinchuriki as it speared through the cloud of steam. The water dragon roared as it sped past Naruto, the blonde having dodged it, but the dragon quickly made a sharp turn and followed after him. Bikujutsu! Naruto hopped into the air and flew around in the air, the water dragon chasing after him. He barrel rolled, looped-a-looped, dove and climbed. He performed every aerial acrobatic trick in the book. No way! Kakashi uttered in shock. Cor. Are you serious? That's impossible, but he's… Sakura muttered as turned away from the spectacle before them to look at Fu, while pointing at Naruto. He's flying? Fu nodded in confirmation as she looked to her soon-to-be teammate. I was surprised the first time I saw it. To be able to fly is something that never thought was possible for regular shinobi. It really is pretty cool when you see it up close. Cor. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the water dragon's rapidly approaching form, and he quickly took on a burst of speed and smashed down onto the ground. He rolled with the momentum of his fall before quickly climbing back to his feet. He rotated on his heel, raising his leg high into the air before smashing it down on the ground. All eyes widened in amazement and shock as a massive slab of rock was ripped free from its earthen confines. The rock was raised up into the air before the blonde leaped and lashed out with a spin kick, sending the rock flying towards the water dragon at a tremendous speed. However, the liquid serpent was not stopped as the high pressures of the chakra-infused water speared through the slab of stone. The water dragon swallowed him whole and arched into the air to slam him into the ground, but the blonde had other plans. Chakra swirled to life, condensing into the compact sphere of destruction. Its pure power was enough to destabilize the water dragon, allowing him to break free. Naruto then performed his Bukujutsu, hovering in the air for a moment before diving towards ground zero with his arm raised back. Rasengan! He aimed the attack at Kakashi, but the Sharingan user quickly leaped out of the way and a massive explosion of water occurred. Kakashi landed a few feet away from the edge of the river only for Naruto to follow after him. He raised his hands to form the cross-shaped hand sign that was his signature jutsu. Taju Kagebunshin no Jutsu! A massive cloud of white smoke extended along the expanse of the training ground before dispersing with the wind. Kakashi sighed as he rubbed the back of his head. I forgot that he could make so many. He muttered as he gazed upon the army of 2,000. Naruto pointed at Kakashi and grinned foxily. Attack! The order was given, and with a loud battle cry, the army of blondes stampeded towards Kakashi. The silver-haired jounin looked at the clones, his Sharingan rotating as he slipped into a fighting position. Alright Naruto, let's see you try to keep up. Kakashi then stamped his foot down on the ground before channeling chakra into his legs. With a forceful push, the ground cracked beneath his feet, and he began his onslaught. He grabbed the arm of one clone and easily broke it before spinning on his heel to crash a roundhouse kick to the side of another. Two clones dove down from above with their Rasengan in hand, but Kakashi's Sharingan saw the opening in their descents, and so he grabbed them by their wrists and spun them around before hurling them away. The ground shook. A massive explosion of blue occurred as the spiraling spheres crashed into the ground, taking out their fellow clones in the process. Futon de Tapa. A clone pushed its palms forward and a powerful burst of wind slammed into Kakashi from the side, and he rolled with the attack only to be grabbed by a clone and swung overhead. A spiderweb of cracks formed as Kakashi was harshly slammed into the ground, but the silver-haired man kicked the clone in the chest before catching another clone as it aimed to slam down on him. He went into a backwards roll, simultaneously kicking the clone off of him, and climbed back to his feet. 4 clones surrounded Kakashi and went through hand signs before clapping their hands together. Futon, Tatsumaki no Jutsu. The wind swirled to life and 4 powerful tornadoes formed. The wind circulation systems tore trenches in the earth as they moved to draw Kakashi into them, but the copy ninja anchored himself to the ground with chakra and took advantage of the winds. He formed his own hand signs and ended on the tiger sign. Katon, Karya Endin. Kakashi exhaled a massive burst of flame that took on the image of a roaring fire dragon. The fiery reptile arched through the air and allowed its flames to be swept up the chakra-infused winds. The tornadoes quickly became spiraling firestorms, and Kakashi replaced himself with a clone to escape, watching as the fiery tornadoes crashed against each other and generated a massive explosion. As numerous clones were destroyed, Kakashi leaped through the smoke cloud and then kicked a clone in the face, dispersing it only to then be grabbed by his hair and taken down to the ground. He threw his legs over his head to plant his feet firmly against the clone's skull before going into a whirl of movement that held off a few of the other charging clones, but was then sent flying through the air as a bolt of blue lightning slammed into the ground near his feet. Kakashi tried to right himself in midair, but a few clones followed after him with their bukujutsu before bombarding him with blows. Kakashi grunted in pain as he was hit in the face with a punch that sent him into the path of a spin kick of another clone. Kakashi spiraled through the air as his body went with the rotation of the attack only to be grabbed out of the air by his hair, the knee of the clone now burying itself into his belly. The wind was driven from his lungs as the clone followed up with a straight kick to the diaphragm, and soon Kakashi was being attacked from all sides. He was battered through the air like a rag doll before the clone ended it by clasping its hands high above its head and slamming the hammer blow on top of his skull. Kakashi crashed into the ground and generated a small dust cloud from the impact. The sound of chakra spinning then met his ears and Kakashi groaned as he opened his eyes. Blue flooded his vision as the 2 clones descended upon him with their Rasengan attacks, but before they could, Kakashi's Sharingan suddenly changed shape. The Tomo lengthened and joined together to form an odd triangular shuriken-like shape. Kamui? Kakashi muttered. The clones' eyes widened and suddenly they felt as if they were being pulled into something. Space and time warped into a singularity, and soon the clones were dispersed into puffs of smoke. The original Naruto had his eyes wide with awe as he received the memories of the now deceased clones. What was that? Kakashi panted as he rose back to his feet, his Sharingan reverting back to normal. He's faster, stronger, and the number of clones is overwhelming me now. To think I had to use the Mangekyo Sharingan and Kamui against Naruto. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. You've really gotten strong, Naruto, but it's time I wrap this up. The copy ninja vanished into a puff of smoke and all the clones and their creator were caught off guard as Kakashi then descended from above and grabbed 2 clones by their necks and choke slammed them, cratering the ground from the force. He rose back to his feet and summoned forth a water dragon that collided with multiple bursts of lightning from the clones. But those clones quickly met their end as the earth rumbled and Kakashi slammed his hands on the ground. Doton, Doryuso! The spears of earth erupted from the ground like spines, impaling any and every clone they came into contact with. Kakashi hopped into the air as a clone tried to grab him. A storm of kunai then appeared from all angles, but his Sharingan kept him within the loop, foreseeing the rain of steel. He quickly grabbed a kunai out of the air and blocked the ones that were sure to score fatal blows on his person, wincing when the ones he failed to block stabbed into his arms and thighs. He landed on the ground and stabbed the kunai through the head of the clone underground, a puff of smoke filtering through the earth. He then ripped out the kunai and blocked the kenjutsu attacks of the blondes as Naruto had managed to recover his sword and generate more clones that wielded the weapons. Once a few of the sword-wielding clones were disarmed and killed off, Kakashi gave himself some room by generating a fireball. The explosion killed many clones. The Jounin then went through three-hand signs. A sound akin to 1,000 birds chirping in unison echoed across the battlefield, and Kakashi now held his own original jutsu within his hands. The orb of chakra and lightning was clenched tightly in his palm before he took off at a great speed. Raikiri. The clones were barely able to keep up as Kakashi speared through their ranks. It was as if a lightning bolt was moving through them, leaving behind smoke and voltage in its wake. Clones screamed in pain as they were killed off quickly, but Naruto managed to quickly stop his sensei in his tracks as he rushed forward with his own chakra attack. Rasengan, the spiraling sphere, crashed against the jutsu said to cut through lightning. The two shinobi gritted their teeth as they fought for dominance. The force of their colliding attacks generated a powerful shockwave, but Naruto utilized his larger chakra capacity to effectively enhance his Rasengan's power and size. What the? Raya! Naruto shoved the Rasengan forwards and took out Kakashi's Raikiri, slamming the attack into his chest. Kakashi released a cry of pain as the Rasengan began grinding through his vest before making an explosive impact with his stomach. The Rasengan exploded and Kakashi was sent spiraling through the air, crashing through one of the boulders of the training before smashing into a tree, breaking the bark and sending it falling to the ground. The smoke cloud that formed dispersed to reveal Kakashi lying on his back against a broken tree trunk, blood flowing from the area where his skull cracked and over his right eye, and a painful-looking, spiral-shaped injury was visible and printed on his belly. He looked up, his Sharingan eye widening as a pair of shadows encompassed his down form. Two clones descended from above and drew back their arms as they each summoned forth a Rasengan. Lightning sparked from one of the clones while the wind bent around the other. One Rasengan became a bright blue ball of pulsating electricity and plasma, while the other was covered by a small pale white-blue shuriken. Futon, Rasengan! Raitun, Rasengan! The two clones moved to bring down the finishing blows, but just as Kakashi's eye was about to use Kamui. Alright, that's enough. The clones paused, their attacks hovering just a few inches away from the Jounin while Kakashi's eye was already in its Mangekyo state. The original Naruto, his clones, and Kakashi all turned to look at Tsunade as she stepped out from behind a tree. Jiraiya and Shizen followed suit. Bachan? Erokyofu? Shizen Ne-chan? Naruto tilted his head in confusion. I thought you were busy giving Bachan updates on our stuff about the Akatsuki. Why are you here? I already told her what she needed to hear, Jiraiya answered. So we decided to take a look at your little Jounin test. Gotta say, Gaki, you've gotten a lot better. Kakashi, what's your take on Naruto's skills? The Godame Hokage smirked in amusement as the former ANBU captain gave her a mild glare. Sakura quickly ran over to her former sensei and began to work on healing him, the comforting green glow of healing chakra spreading over his body. His kenjutsu is impressive, not as much as Kushina-sama's, but he'll get there soon enough. He began. His ability to sense genjutsu is on par with a low-level chunin, but his ability to dispel them is far above my own due to his large chakra capacity. Taijutsu-wise, he's stronger and faster than I ever was at his age. If it weren't for the Sharingan and my own years of experience, I'm quite sure that I would be terribly outclassed. And his ninjutsu is quite good. I'm sure he knows more than what he's shown so far. I do. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki confirmed. He coordinates much better with his clones to attack, and his Rasengan formation speed is impressive. Also, to use that high-level Katan Jutsu, it covered such a wide area and moved so quickly that I was forced to use such a high-level Suiton Jutsu to defend against it. His Futon is deadly and his Right-un is accurate when used. Also, judging from the fact that those two jutsu you were about to hit me with were the elemental versions of the Rasengan, I can only assume that you've performed what Minato-sensei could not. Yup. Naruto grinned widely. I completed it for both chakra natures. Kakashi chuckled at his sensei's son before turning to Tsunade. And to top it off, he forced me to use the Mangekyo Sharingan and Kamui. I'd say he's earned the title of Jounin. Mangekyo Sharingan? Naruto and Sakura's eyes widened. Kakashi-sensei, how did you do that? Sakura asked. I thought you had to. I didn't gain it through the original means. He interrupted his former student's train of thought. I merely continued to train and using it to the point I passed out. Apparently, with enough effort I managed to unlock it. Well, that and the fact that I placed myself in a genjutsu that would generate the illusion of myself performing the act of gaining the Mangekyo. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto and Sakura looked at the man before them with deep frowns. Alright, that's enough moping. Kakashi sighed as he moved to climb back to his feet. He stumbled a bit before looking at Fu and Sakura. Well, it seems that Naruto tired me out a lot more than I thought. My chakras are pretty low, and that Rasengan hurts a lot more than it should. I told you, I was gonna vent at you for not telling me about Tuchan and Kaa-chan. Naruto started with a small glare. Well, I guess I deserve that. He sighed. Anyway, I'm in no condition to test you both, so, Sakura, you're already a Chunin, why not fight Fu and see how she fares against you? All heads snapped in the direction of Kakashi with surprised expressions. Are you serious? Everyone exclaimed. Well, like I said, I'm all tuckered out. Kakashi chuckled, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. You're a capable kunoichi of Konoha, Sakura. I'm sure a little spar against our newest Chunin would be no problem. Oh, well, I guess that's true. Sakura muttered. Come on, Sakura. Tsunade patted her pink-haired student on the head. You're both the students of members of the Sannin. Now go out and kick her ass and show her why I'm a better sensei than a said super pervert. No way in hell are you better than me, Haim. Jiraiya argued. The two Sannin glared at one another, causing everyone to sweat drop. The others then moved aside to the tree line as Sakura and Fu took their places on the training grounds. Fu and Sakura stared at one another, sizing each other up for their fight. You know, Goldilocks told me about you when we were training, Fu said. Did he now? Sakura asked with a raised eyebrow. Yup. Fu nodded. He said that you were a pretty decent kunoichi, but after thinking it over, he said you weren't that big a help in the long run. Sakura turned to Naruto with a mixture of betrayal and rage. However, Naruto met her eyes with his own harsh stare. You did your best, but you didn't make it to the Chunin finals from what I heard. You were also not one of the few chosen to help bring back the Uchiha, which, if you had been better at your career, you could have also been a part of. So, sorry to say, I'm extremely disappointed and my expectations of you are very low right now, Sakura-san. Bitch. I've been called worse. The former Taki shinobi replied. But you've trained for 3 years with Tsunade-sama, so… She slipped into a fighting stance, and her orange eyes blazed with battle lust. Let's see if those years were worth it. Sakura's emerald orbs blazed with fury before she pulled back on her gloves. I'll make sure you know why I was chosen as Tsunade Shosho's student. Sakura took off from her spot and sped across the training ground before rearing back her arm to let loose a strong right jab. Fu quickly sidestepped the strike and smirked. You have a good look in your eyes, Sakura-san. Fu stated before twisting her body and jamming her elbow into Sakura's face. Sakura stumbled backwards, clutching her pained face only to then find herself being gripped harshly by the back of her head. Fu pulled Sakura down while simultaneously bringing her knee up, smashing the joint against Sakura's face. Fu followed up with a strong right jab to the chest, a left jab following directly after. She bent her legs and channeled the momentum up through her feet as she pushed off and delivered a fierce uppercut that sent Sakura off her feet. Fu then finished the string of attacks and she stamped her foot on the ground to gain some stability, and lashed out with a fierce right punch that dug itself into the pinket's stomach. Sakura coughed up a mixture of blood and spittle before she flew through the air. She rolled for a few feet as she smashed into the ground, but managed to go with the momentum of the roll to swiftly climb back to her feet. Her eyes widened as Fu fell from above and she went into a backhand spring, avoiding the hammer strike. The chakra exoskeleton-covered blow smashed the ground and caused a small crater to form, but Sakura quickly channeled chakra into her feet to immediately close the distance between herself and the Nanabai Jinchuriki. Shinaro! Sakura's devastating right hook made impact with Fu's chest, and the orange-eyed kunoichi released a gasp as she felt the strong blow make impact. Her body folded over before she was sent rocketing through the air. She bounced across the ground, leaving a few small trenches as she skidded during her bounces, before smashing into a nearby boulder. A small dust cloud formed as Fu's body left an imprint in the rock. Whoa, since when did Sakura-chan get so strong? Naruto asked with visible surprise. I see medical jutsu aren't all you taught her, Neheim? Jiraiya said. She's my apprentice, Tsunade replied. Like I told you after Kiri's Chunin exams, Sakura was in desperate need of improvement. I wasn't going to let her just be a medical expert. With her chakra control, she was quickly able to utilize my form of taijutsu. Naruto absent-mindedly scratched at the area of his Hittite where Tsunade had flicked him in the forehead. The flick sent him flying several feet away, so that meant, I can take it, but I think it's best if I don't allow Sakura-chan to hit me anymore. I concur, Kamina said with a nod. Though your Kitsu no Mai is your stronger taijutsu style, it is more about enhancing your physical attributes through chakra. Your friend there, her taijutsu is much more deadly when used efficiently. Channeling chakra into a single point, and then releasing that chakra upon making contact with the surface sends a ripple effect through the body. It's an effective combination of striking with strong blows, but with the side effect of internal damage. Fu grunted as she pulled herself free from the boulder. Damn. That might have hurt more if I didn't have my exoskeleton. She then tilted her head and cracked her neck. Fu took off and left a trail of dust behind her from the speed she moved at. As she neared Sakura, the pink-haired Chunin let loose a strong punch. However, Fu leaped over the attack, a crater forming when Sakura's punch impacted with the ground. Fu landed deftly on her feet behind Sakura and then lashed out with a strong kick to the back. Sakura went into a forward roll as she stumbled forward before letting loose a series of kunai from her weapon's pouch. Fu crossed her arms in front of her face and Sakura's emerald orbs widened in shock as the weapons were deflected off of the exoskeleton. What the? Sakura didn't get to finish her exclamation as she quickly rolled out of the way of Fu's axe kick. As the pinkette leaped back to gain some distance, she quickly withdrew a kunai. Sparks flew as the exoskeleton-covered strike made friction against the sharp steel, but Fu's kick broke through Konoha Chunin's defenses. However, Sakura reacted much quicker than Fu expected her to, the pinkette grabbing her by her outstretched leg. With a roar, Sakura swung Fu overhead and slammed her into the ground with enough force to crack the earth, tearing it asunder. Fu bounced off the ground from the recoil and Sakura let loose a strong upward swing, nailing Fu on the chin before chakra flowed heavily through her index finger, holding the finger back with her thumb. Eat this! Sakura yelled before letting loose the strong flick. Fu saw white for a split second as the powerful finger flick nailed her directly between the eyes. Fu tumbled through the air, but managed to right herself and dug her feet into the ground, tearing trenches in it as she rose back to her feet. Her eyes widened when Sakura leaped after her and then pulled her arm back, chakra flowing to the tips of her knuckles as she let loose the strike. Okasho! The Nanabu Jinchuriki quickly took to the skies as she called upon her ability to sprout a pair of wings that weren't unlike her bijous. The wings buzzed rapidly to carry her into the air, but her orange eyes were wide as she felt the force of the shockwave brought about by Sakura's attack. Looking down upon it, Fu saw the whole ground had been torn asunder. The ground was cracked and scattered about, almost similar to that of flower petals. Oh, come on! Sakura exclaimed. You can fly too? Well, I have a bijou with wings. Fu called back to her to be teammate. It only makes sense. I'm really starting to hate you, Sakura exclaimed. To vent, Sakura leaped to the tree line, channeling chakra into her arms. With a roar of effort, the pink-haired kunoichi ripped the massive tree up out of the ground and tossed it into the air. She leaped after her new weapon before unleashing a devastating roundhouse that sent the tree rocketing towards the Jinchuriki like a spear, visible streams of air resistance trailing behind it. Fu raised her arm and clenched her hand into a tight fist. Chakra flowed around the limb before taking the shape of Komiai's horn. She spun on her feet to build up momentum before stabbing the horn-shaped chakra weapon like a spear. Haiden, Horan Busta! A powerful burst of chakra tore through the tree, bisecting it easily. If it weren't for Sakura being taken down by gravity, she would have been roughly impaled as Chakra's spear extended and continued for a few meters past her former aerial location. Sakura landed on the ground, stamping her feet so that a piece of already broken rock would sail into the air. She threw the rock directly at Fu, but the Nanabi Jinchuriki ripped through it with her Horin Busta. Sakura quickly leaped into the air and took advantage of the flying pieces of stone, literally making them into stepping stones as she closed the distance between herself and Fu. Fu quickly reacted and grabbed Sakura by her neck and zoomed towards the ground, slamming the pinkette and then dragging her through the dirt. She then came to a stop, spinning on her heels to build up momentum before hurling Sakura at a tree. Sakura flipped in midair and planted her feet against the bark, cracking it as she pushed off, sending herself skyward. Fu snarled as she went to meet her opponent in the air, but her eyes widened when Sakura let loose a kunai with an already burning explosion tag on it. Shit! The tag went off and the explosion encompassed Fu in a cloud of smoke and fire, the resulting shockwave sending her spiraling into the ground, creating a small crater upon impact. The mint-haired kunoichi's eyes widened when Sakura then showed off her flexibility by raising her right leg high into the air, making it perfectly vertical. However, that was not the cause of her surprise, but rather it was the extremely noticeable amount of chakra that flowed along the length of her leg before accumulating at her heel. Tsutenkyaku! Sakura roared before slamming her heel down on the Nanabi Jinchuriki's body. Fu's orange eyes widened as she released a howl of pain, the kick being strong enough to break through her exoskeleton and damage her. Blood and spittle erupted from her mouth as the force of the destructive axe kick tore through her body and caused the earth to shudder and quake. The crater she lay in then expanded to 3 times its normal size and the shockwave had everyone's hair ruffling. Cor. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he turned to Tsunade. You taught her that? Naruto has his father's Rasengan and the Kage Bunshin. The Uchiha was given Kakashi's Chidori and his Sharingan. Tsunade reasoned. It's only fitting I teach my students some of my personal taijutsu techniques to go with her newfound super strength. Yeah, but you shattered a castle with that thing. Tsunade waved him off. Bah, go be a whiny crybaby somewhere else. Ero Kyofu, what is that supposed to be? Naruto asked. It's Tsunadeheim's strongest physical attack. Remember how when we went to look for her so she could become the Godame Hokage, how we found Kikyo Castle as nothing but rubble? Uh-huh. Naruto nodded before his blue eyes widened in realization. Wait, you mean Bachan did that with a single kick? Well, technically, I did it with a punch in order to show Orochimaru and Kabuto not to fuck with me. The kick was when they started to annoy me, Tsunade stated. Naruto's sweat dropped at his fellow blonde. You have no shame against your wanton destruction. And you have no shame for creating the Oiroke no Jutsu. Touché, Naruto replied. Tsunade then looked over her student's destruction and shrugged. Meh, it'll do. My crater would have been at least 10 times the size of that. Bachan is scary, Naruto muttered to Kakashi, the silver-haired Jounin merely nodding in agreement. Cor. The pink-haired Kunoichi panted in exertion as she looked down at her opponent. I win, she gasped out while wiping the sweat from her brow. She then moved to help Fu up and drag her out of the crater, but Fu suddenly disappeared in a puff of smoke. The fuck? Sakura exclaimed before a nearby rock vanished in a plume of smoke, revealing itself to have been Fu in disguise. Sakura's face was suddenly punched harshly, sending her tumbling into the air. Fu spread her wings and took off after her, batting her around in the air like Naruto had done to Kakashi with his clones. She then ended the barrage of attacks as she grabbed Sakura by her ankle and hurled her down to ground zero. You didn't think I'd stay down like a pussy, did you, Sakura-san? Fu asked cockily as she watched her to-be teammates slowly climb back to her feet. Sakura spat out the blood from her mouth before looking up at her airborne opponent. I spent 2 years with the boy who can make an army of over 1,000 with a single hand sign. You should have expected that I would have learned the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu along the way. Now to finish this. Fu went through a few hand signs, ending the tiger sign before inhaling deeply. Haiden, Rinpungakure no Jutsu. A shining white powder was exhaled from Fu's jaws and Sakura released a cry of surprise as she was effectively blinded. Sakura stumbled around in the cloud, but Fu quickly went through more hand signs, ending on the tiger sign. Haiden, Masatsu Hibana! Fu clenched her jaws tightly, and with a bit of chakra application, she ground her teeth and set off a few sparks from her mouth. The sparks traveled into the cloud of shining powder before igniting said powder. A powerful explosion was set off, and Sakura released a loud scream of pain as she was engulfed in fire and smoke. A moment of silence passed across the battlefield as all eyes watched the smoke cloud begin to dissolve into the winds. Once all the smoke had dispersed and the dust had settled, Sakura was revealed to be unconscious, bleeding and covered in a few second-degree burns. Dust and dirt covered her body and stood out amongst her pink locks. Fu landed on the ground before chuckling nervously. Maybe I went a bit overboard with that size of explosion. And my student proves she is better than yours. Ha! Jiraiya pointed a finger at his fellow Sanin's face. Suck it, Haim! Tsunade's eyebrow twitched as her brown eyes settled on the white-haired man. Move that finger away from my face if you don't want it ripped off. Yes, Haim. Jiraiya replied as he quickly withdrew said finger. Tsunade sighed before turning to Shizen. Shizen, take Sakura to the hospital and patch her up. She's gonna be out for 24 hours most likely. Yes, Tsunade-sama. Don't worry, Bachan, Shizen Nei-chan. Naruto spoke up as he summoned forth a clone. I got it. The clone took Sakura up from her place on the ground before vanishing in a swirl of wind, heading off towards the hospital. So, how'd we do? Well, Kakashi already gave you the green light for receiving the rank of Jounin, Naruto. Tsunade then turned to Fu. As for you, being the Jinchuriki of the Nanabi is bound to be a boon for the village. Your combat skills are quite exemplary, as well as you were able to handle Sakura in close combat. Your levels of endurance and defense are quite intriguing, seeing as you took a direct hit from my apprentice's Tsutenkyaku. It may not be the same level as my own, but it was still a strong attack. Care to explain? It's a side effect of being the Nanabi's Jinchuriki. Fu motioned to Naruto with her thumb. Being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Goldilocks here gets enhanced senses to go with his healing factor. My healing factor comes with a chakra exoskeleton that constantly covers my body. Only an extremely powerful attack, or an attack composed of a Biju's chakra, can break through it. I can still feel the pain of the attacks, but because of the healing factor, I immediately recover, so I'm pretty much invulnerable to a certain degree. Interesting. Tsunade mused as she looked over Fu's form. The bruise on her stomach from Sakura's axe kick was still healing, but it showed that the mint-haired Kunoichi was not lying. Now that you've gotten a look at what my apprentice can do, can you say that you will be able to work well with her? Fu shrugged. She has a temper and seems like she can be quickly annoyed. That'll take some work to get used to, since I like to be blunt with my words, which is why I said what I said before we fought. But yeah, she's a close combat fighter like me, so I can see a lot of stuff I can do with her on the battlefield. That's what she said? Jiraiya muttered. Tsunade and Fu turned to glare at the perverted Sannin, Fu raising a middle finger at her sensei before sticking her tongue out at him like the mature Kunoichi that she was. Anyway, as I was saying, I can work with Sakura-san. Plus, Fu wrapped her arm around her fellow Jinchuriki's shoulder and pulled him close to her. I got Goldilocks here to work with too, and use him as a meat shield if I make Sakura-san mad. Naruto turned and gave a deadpan expression to the orange-eyed girl. All of my hate, Mosshead. All of my hate. Love you too, Goldilocks. She patted the whiskered teen on his cheek. Tsunade chuckled at the interaction between the two bijou holders before nodding her head. Very well. Uzumaki Naruto, Fu, starting first thing tomorrow, you will be welcomed back into Konohagaku no Sato's ranks as a Jounin and a Chunin respectively. I look forward to your work for the betterment of the village. Naruto and Fu stood a bit straight before mock saluting the Godame. Yes, Hokage-sama. Cor. Sunagakyo no Sato. The moon shone brightly in the night sky, accompanying the silver stars and casting light over the area of Kaze no Kuni. The desert winds blew lightly through the shinobi village of Suna, but unknown to many, a presence had begun to cast its shadow, both literally and metaphorically. The form of a white bird made of what seemed to be a form of clay-like material flapped its wings. The rooftop guards of the Kazekage's building looked up and their eyes widened as they took note of the airborne creature, But just as they were about to go about the usual protocol of seeing an unknown assailant, their faces were covered by what looked like large spiders made of clay. The bird's rider raised a hand and formed the ram's sign as the muffled screams of the guards were all but completely inaudible to all. Katsu. Small explosions went off and the heads of the Suna guards were literally blown apart. Blood and brain matter splattered the roof of the Kazekage building and the 5 bodies fell to the ground, smoke rising from the stumps that used to be their necks and skulls. The bird of clay then descended and landed on the roof, its rider hopping off the avian mount. However, just as the unknown assailant was about to move on after observing his handiwork, he quickly leaped back as a spike of sand nearly speared him through the face and ended his life. However, it did do the job of knocking away the triangular straw hat the man wore to mask his face from view. Huh! And I thought I had done well enough to actually pull off an assassination of a kage, he muttered as his hat was lost to the winds of the desert village. You killed my shinobi. The raspy and deep voice of Gaara met the ears of the assailant. Quickly shedding the cloak and hat that acted to signify his status as the Godame Kazekage, Gaara held up his hand and the sand flowed from his gourd. His pale green eyes narrowed with restrained rage before adjusting his stance, almost as if he was looking down upon a lesser being, but in the midst of doing so, he also took the time to quickly look over his opponent. The man had slanted blue eyes and very long blonde hair which he wore drawn into a half ponytail with the rest hanging down freely. The bang hanging over his left eye concealed his eye scopes, signifying that he was a long-range fighter. He also had mouths in each of the palms of his hands that seemed to move independently of his actual speaking mouth, the tongues lolling around like a slinky. Under his cloak, he wore a V-neck, sleeveless, midriff shirt with mesh armor underneath it along with pants, stirrups, and sandals. Around his forehead, he wore the haitate of a shinobi of a Wagakure, but the slash through the symbol indicated his status as a missing nin. However, the cloak itself was what caught his attention. Black with red clouds. The Ichibi Jinchuriki muttered. You're Akatsuki? That I am, and we've come for you, Jinchuriki. You have trespassed upon the sacred ground of the Godame Kazekage. Gaara stated firmly as his sand, bloodlust, and chakra all flared in tandem with each other. You will not take Shikaku, and you will not be allowed to leave my village alive. Chapter 15, Godame Kazekage. You have trespassed on the sacred ground of the Godame Kazekage. Gaara stated firmly as his sand, bloodlust, and chakra flared in tandem with each other. You will not take Shikaku, and you will not be allowed to leave my village alive. Not a second after speaking, Gaara's sand rushed to grab a hold of the bomber and end him. However, Gaara's assailant expertly leaped into the air, landing on his giant clay bird and soared at high speeds as Gaara's sand gave chase. His bird soared higher before diving down into the village and weaved around the buildings and bridges of Sunagakure. The blonde bomber glanced at his left hand and smirked. Not much longer now. What the? The blonde looked up and gasped, seeing Gaara's sand heading straight for him. Within seconds of the sand nearing him, his clay bird lifted itself into the air, narrowly escaping his target's jutsu. He looked behind himself and grinned at Gaara from above. You're pretty good, aren't you? Gaara stood in the same spot motionless while his sand whirled around him as he watched his opponent carefully. Gaara narrowed his eyes at his assailant, and formed a cloud of sand for him to stand on top of to go after the blonde. The blonde's grin grew wider as he stared at Gaara. That Bijuu sure comes in handy, doesn't it? He thought to himself. Tell me, how did you guess that I was an intruder? There are no birds like that one in this desert. Gaara answered stoically. Humph, is that so? Sunagakure no Sato, guard post. Hey, just what in the hell is going on out there? The door to the roof of the Kazekage's building opened up, revealing one of the Suna Jonin. Isn't anyone gonna tell me what's going on? What the Jonin paused in mid-sentence as he saw the remains left of one of the guards guarding the Kazekage's rooftop. What happened out here? He gazed at the body in shock just before raising his head to see a mysterious cloaked man on a bird and Kazekage-sama. Sunagakure no Sato, Kazekage office. Heading towards Gaara's office was a Jonin following a young ninja in a black top and trousers, held together by a red sash. He also wore black fingerless gloves, and 3 large red scrolls held together on his back. But the most interesting thing about his appearance was the black hood with the Suna Hittite on it and the face paint he wore. His hood was unique in the sense that it sported cat-like ears, and the design of his burgundy-colored paint made him recognizable amongst the shinobi and villagers of Sunagakure. He was none other than Gaara's older brother, Kankuro. Well, how did this intruder, whoever he is, get inside of the village? I thought that Captain Yura was supposed to have tightened security? Kankuro spoke through gritted teeth. The Jonin walking with him answered, why yes, but that's the strange part. We haven't been able to locate Captain Yura anywhere. Kankuro stopped mid-step and turned around, facing the Jonin accompanying him. What did you say? Sunagakure no Sato, village outskirts. 2 figures stood near the outskirts of the sand village watching the engagement between the Godame Kazakage and the blonde Akatsuki member. The shorter of the 2 grunted in dissatisfaction. Grr. That idiot Deidara. He just had to make a circus out of it. The shorter figure was a hunched figure, spoke in a raspy tone, wearing the Akatsuki cloak and a bamboo hat. Yura. The figure grounded out slowly in his raspy voice to the Suna Jonin standing next to him. You should get back to the village. It would complicate things if they were to find you here. Yes, Sasori-sama. Yura dispersed using the Suna Shunshin no Jutsu, sand body flicker technique. The now revealed Sasori stared on in the distance, watching his partner fight the Kazakage. Get on with it, Deidara. You know I don't like to be kept waiting. Sunagakure no Sato, Kazakage office. Kankuro knocked on the door to his brother's office. Gaara, you in there? No response. Kankuro walked inside of his brother's office to find that Gaara wasn't inside the dark room. Where on earth could Gaara be at a time like this? Kankuro-sama. Kankuro turned around to see a bearded Jonin with a scar running down his left eye. Kazakage-sama is fighting in the sky above the village. What? He's fighting in the... Kankuro ran from the door to the window in less than a second to see his brother standing firm on top of his sand facing the blonde-haired bomb user, just as many other Suna ninja watched, discarding anything they were doing. Sunagakure no Sato, above the village. Humph, so much for a covert operation. At least this way, I don't have to go looking for you, Ichibi Jinchuriki. Gaara said nothing in response as he raised both of his hands above his head, surprising his enemy, and summoned the sand from within Sunagakure. The sand rushed into the air, forming a massive wave behind the red-haired Kage, growing larger and larger with each passing second. Deidara stared in awe at the sheer amount of sand Gaara willed with ease. Tactically, he does have the advantage with all this sand. This is his home field after all. This could get messy. Gaara commanded his sand cloud to move towards Deidara with his sand tsunami following after him, surprising Deidara even further. The Kage formed the ram hand sign with his right hand before executing another. Futon, Chisahibi. Snakes made out of sand flew past Gaara, heading straight for Deidara, aiming to pierce through both and his clay bird. However, Deidara's bird maneuvered around the snakes and veered left while Deidara began preparing his clay bombs. His clay bird shot forward at Gaara, weaving around the sand projectiles Gaara threw at him. Gaara himself came towards Deidara on his sand cloud with the intention of meeting his opponent head-on. The IWA missing Nin cocked back both arms, ready to throw multiple clay bombs at the Kazakage. The 2 opponents got closer, and closer until Gaara made an unexpected move. Gaara's sand cloud dipped underneath Deidara's clay bird, flying past him. Deidara turned his head facing Gaara only to see the Kazakage staring directly at him with both arms outstretched and crossed, making an X, both hands clenched in a choking motion. Deidara's senses went haywire, alerting him that something was wrong. He quickly snapped his head back in front of him and quickly had to veer his clay bird to the left to avoid being crushed by the 2 demonic hands made of sand that reached for him. After narrowly dodging Gaara's Suna no Kaiwan, Deidara soared into the air and circled around the air above Gaara, his smirk bigger than ever. The real fun is about to begin. Deidara shouted, throwing multiple mini clay birds at Gaara's Kaiwan technique as it inched towards him. Gaara's sand moved fluidly around him as Deidara threw his birds at Gaara's sand, yet the birds themselves aren't what irked Gaara. No, not at all. What caught Gaara's attention was the aftermath of his jutsu meeting with his assailant's jutsu. Each time his sand came into contact with them, they would explode, blowing off small chunks of the granular substance. Unusual explosive devices, accurately guided towards their targets. Gaara thought as he analyzed what little he could of what Deidara had shown him thus far. Deidara reached into his pouch of clay and infused it with his special Bakutan chakra. I think I'm starting to get the hang of this, yeah? He said as he continued his defensive maneuvers around the Shikaka-like arms. Now then. Deidara pulled out both of his hands, revealing 2 clay swans with 4 wings. This time, Deidara threw the 2 swans. As soon as they were thrown, they immediately poofed into larger birds. He quickly formed the ram hand sign, executing his signature jutsu. With feeling, the swans zipped towards Gaara, closing in on his position faster than his sand arms could react, ignoring the various whips of sand that made feeble attempts to swat them away, and then Katsu! Boom! A fiery explosion erupted in Gaara's vicinity, letting loose a huge plume cloud in its wake. Many shinobi and villagers stared in horror as their Kazekage took an explosion head-on. Despite the growing fear of their Kazekage actually being hurt, or even worse, the higher-ranking ninja of Sunagakure knew of the Godaime Kazekage's absolute defense and believed wholeheartedly that he survived the explosion. The smoke from the explosion slowly faded away and revealed a cocoon made entirely of sand without any scratches whatsoever. Clever, he encased himself in a cocoon entirely made of sand, and it seems that my bids didn't even have an effect on him. It's amazing that he survived the blast. Well, if he survived the blast, Deidara thought as he stared at the cocoon. However, what Deidara failed to notice was the monstrous arms of Shikaku forming around him until it was too late. Ninpo, Sabaku Ro! Ninja art, sand binding coffin, the giant arms rapidly enclosed themselves around Deidara, trapping him inside a hellish prison of condensed sand. Things just got a lot more complicated, yeah? Inside the prison, Deidara glared as he desperately tried to escape but failed miserably. Before he knew it, the technique completely imprisoned him in a cocoon similar to the cocoon that Gaara was protected inside of. He did it! Kankuro said triumphantly, causing sighs of relief from the shinobi standing around him. Some even cheered as they viewed the display made by Gaara as a victory. Leave it to the Kazekage to finish things. Yeah, one ninja nodded. As long as we have the Kazekage, Sunagakure will be fine. Humph. Kankuro smirked, feeling proud and satisfied with his little brother's handiwork. After his brother came out of his sand sphere, he planned to take his brother home and celebrate another victory. However, Kankuro's smirk disappeared as he noticed something off. Hold on. A large rumble could be heard throughout the village as the prison holding Deidara shook and then burst into a massive shower of sand before the villagers froze as a white-winged beast flapped its wings with the enemy fighting their Kazekage standing on top of it. Bakutan, Shirtsu Bakuretsu Hiryu. The dragon itself was massive, easily 3 times the size of Gaara's sphere. Gaara watched on via his third eye technique and immediately summoned more sand to restrain the beast. He succeeded in holding its appendages, though briefly. The dragon growled and broke free from its restraints without any trouble and fired mini dragons from its mouth which rushed Gaara's sphere, going through any defense techniques Gaara used to stop them but proved futile as they went straight through his sand like nothing and clutched onto the only thing protecting him from the monsters that relentlessly clawed at the thick sand. Gaara himself started sweating as he held his own against the dragons and continuously pumped his chakra into the technique to fortify his defense. While he believed that the dragons wouldn't get through one of his strongest defensive techniques with their current attempt, he wasn't too sure how long his sand could hold out if the dragons exploded while being so tightly attached to his sand. He knew that no matter how much chakra he pumped into his jutsu, with enough force even the strongest defense can be weakened. He wasn't oblivious to that fact. Deidara stood tall with his blonde hair blowing with a large scroll on top of the head of his dragon. He chuckled when he glanced at the scroll before grabbing it, and pulled up his sleeve revealing a medium-sized seal array, and resealed the scroll back inside. It's a good thing that Sasori-senpai bugged me about preparing ahead and coming up with counter-strategies. My art is created on the spur of the moment, but, in order for artists to better themselves, they must learn and incorporate other styles of art. Deidara thought as he remembered Sasori teaching him how to use seals to store one of his strongest defensive jutsu on his body for desperate situations. While it took a full-on argument and some serious scolding from his senior, he eventually caved in. And to say the least, he was glad that he had this. This is one of my favorite jutsu. For you to force me to use this speaks volumes of your strength. I see clearly now why you're the Godame Kazakage, but tonight you will fall to my superior art. Now experience the true power of my art. Katsu! Deidara flared his chakra with his hands in the signature seal to detonate his clay bombs. Just as Gaara feared, the two dragons grew larger, their bellies swelling to large proportions before glowing with the lights of the fires that had ignited within them. A great explosion destroyed his sphere, but just before the explosion consumed him along with it, he forced himself away from it at the last second. Gaara used the interior of the sphere to catapult himself away while taking a chunk of the sand off of it, and formed a bed of sand to halt his movement, and righted himself with only a few singes on his attire. Gaara took a few seconds to look at the monstrosity that he was forced to face. If he was any other ninja, he probably would have fled the first opportunity he could, but he wasn't like any other ninja. He was the feared Godame Kazakage, Sabaku no Gaara. To have avoided my dragon's explosion from point-blank range, Deidara's dragon arched its head back and spawned 3 more miniature dragons. All 3 dragons roared before flying off at Gaara simultaneously, and launched their own attacks at the red-haired Kage. Even though Gaara kept fighting, he had not fully recuperated from the last onslaught. Trying to keep his sphere intact by constantly fueling it with chakra left him depleted of most of his chakra and stamina. Gaara tried his best to fight off and dodge the dragons, but despite his best efforts, he just couldn't beat them with both his stamina and chakra reserves so low. The 3 dragons bombarded him with clay bombs, chipping away at his shield. Then one dragon slammed into what was left of his shield, causing it to explode on impact. Sand flew everywhere as Gaara's last defense was blown to pieces, with him flying off in the process. He grunted as he lifted a few fingers to try and stop his fall by commanding the remaining sand in his gourd to form a hand and catch him. His plan succeeded with him landing hard on the hand, eliciting a grunt of pain. Gaara clenched his eyes shut with blood running down his forehead as his sand armor cracked around his face. From down below in Sunagakure, the villagers cried out in protest at watching their Kage fall. It didn't take more than a second of seeing their Kage in trouble to act and begin releasing a fury of attacks of their own at the dragons that dared to hurt their leader. Futon, Rankuden. Many Jonin and Chunin fired off air bullets at the remaining dragons, hoping to destroy the things and what their leader finished. Sadly, things weren't going to turn out their way. The dragons lazily dodged the multiple air bullets and fired back their own bullets of clay. Small explosions could be heard around Sunagakure with screams of pain following as ninjas got caught in the blasts. Idiots. Thinking that their weak jutsu could ever have an effect on my art. Deidara turned his head to the down Jinchuriki and smirked. I think it's about time I took the Jinchuriki with me and be done, but... Deidara glanced at the remaining 2 dragons and then at the village. Not before I leave the people of Sunagakure a parting gift. His dragons dived into the village and started bulging, signaling that they were getting ready to explode. Kankuro shouted at the ninja standing beside him, frozen in fear, snapping them out of their daze. Don't just stand there as those things prepare to drop and cause more damage to the village. Throw everything you have at them. The ninja Kankuro commanded broke free from their fear, but a little too late. The dragons let loose a screech and exploded inside of the village. And no! Kankuro shouted in disbelief. A large cloud of smoke formed from the explosions. All he could do was stand hopelessly and watch as the cloud dissipated. However, Kankuro was left in confusion when he saw that no one was harmed or any of the buildings destroyed. He lifted his head and noticed small particles falling. What the? He raised the palm of his hand and outstretched it to see that it was sand falling. His head snapped up and shifted to the giant hand of sand and saw none other than his brother on his left knee holding out his hands panting. No way, he did it. Gaara stopped them. Gaara panted heavily and looked at his village. He watched as his villagers shouted in joy at his effort to save them. He released a deep sigh before turning his head to glare dangerously at Deidara. Deidara stared back at his target and started chuckling. You are one hard man to bring down. Gaara said nothing as he tried to catch his breath. He struggled to pull himself off of his knee and almost fell over but caught himself. Gaara continued to glare at the man who caused his people so much harm in a single night, and grinned as they suffered. You will pay for the harm you've done to the people of Sanagekure, he vowed to himself, clenching his hands into fists. Gaara closed his eyes, concentrating hard on gathering what he had left for this last-ditch technique he developed since his inauguration as Kazekage. If he was to beat the blonde Akatsuki member, then he was going to have to use everything he had to finish this battle here and now. As he began focusing on his chakra, sand began to rise from the ground of Suna and slowly gathered around Gaara in a swirling vortex. Deidara watched in mild satisfaction as Gaara stood motionless, while sand continued to rise and rotate around him. Looks like he's finally getting serious. He slid his right hand into his pouch and left his hand to churn and mold more chakra into his clay. If he's really going to go all out now, I'd better make sure that I have enough explosive clay to counter whatever he's cooking up. Everyone's counting on me, Gaara thought. After the last 3 years, I've gained people who trust in me and believe that I can lead them. After being lost in darkness for so long, I ultimately gave up on friends for the sole purpose of myself, but... Gaara thought back to the time of the joint invasion on Konoha and remembered the first person to ever call him friend. I was saved by someone who understood me. He guided me from that darkness and led me to a better path. A new purpose. And I won't let that purpose be destroyed by the Akatsuki. Not while I still have the power to defend my precious people. Gaara unclenched his right hand and snapped his eyes open upon feeling his tenant's chakra enter his tenketsu points, causing his teeth to morph into small fangs. Gaara's scara was now pitch black, merging with the dark rings around his eyes. His irises changed from their natural pale blue-green to a light gold on top of a black four-pointed star as his pupils. Sand crept up his body and began to mold onto his outfit with the release of his demonic chakra, scaring many villagers watching as Gaara underwent a transformation that many of them were familiar with. Gaara, just what are you doing, relying on its power? Kankuro thought to himself, fearing that his brother might lose control. Gaara bellowed, clapping his hands together, finalizing his technique just as he began feeling the influence of his tenant. Kenjutsu, Shikaku no Jun Moto. Using sheer willpower, Gaara shook off Shikaku's influence, causing a sudden change in the transformation. Instead of forming a miniature version of Shikaku, the sand hardened over his entire body, giving him a metallic gold color with Shikaku's black curseals littering his skin, pulsating every few seconds. Gaara took a second to look at himself, and he couldn't help but feel proud after 3 years of trying to perfect this jutsu. Yet he still wasn't satisfied. He knew that the jutsu wasn't complete. It's still incomplete, but for now, it'll do. He had made this technique to counter taijutsu users like Lee and Niji, and after his encounter with the silver-haired Kekei Genkai user. After that fight, he trained hard to improve his fighting style. While his ultimate defense held true to its name, it was tested to its limits that day, and he nearly lost his life relying solely on it. It was then he realized that he needed something else to use when his ultimate defense didn't pull through. However, he hoped it never got to the point of using this technique for the simple fact that he still couldn't use it to its full potential. He still had a hard time battling off Shikaku's madness, and to make matters worse, he could only use this form for a short period of time before feeling either pain for using Shikaku's chakra too long, or when Shikaku tried to tempt him into drawing more of its power. You will not harm anyone else starting now, Gaara declared before rocketing off with the vortex of sand keeping him in the air as he dashed towards the dragon at amazing speeds. Let's see what you can do while in that form of yours, Ichibi Jinchuriki. Deidara's dragon shot out 5 more dragons from its mouth that flew towards Gaara. They circled around, the redhead repeated, eyeing him like prey before one dived in. Gaara leaped sideways, expertly dodging the dragon, followed by him sending tendrils of sand from his arm to the dragon, piercing it at blinding speeds. As soon as his sand made contact with the clay beast, his Bijuu's curse seal spread around its body until it completely covered it before causing the dragon to burst into sand. Gaara then spun around and launched 2 sand arms at the other dragons to crush them, but his attacks missed them. The dragons soared above the arms and released a volley of bombs, destroying Gaara's technique and quickly followed up by double-teaming Gaara. Both dragons dived at Gaara with their claws cocked back, ready to maim the Bijuu-enhanced Jinchuriki, and it would have worked too. However, in this form, Gaara's reflexes, strength, and speed were enhanced to an extremely high level. He caught both dragons by their throats, his claws digging into their clay forms with ease. Bad move, Jinchuriki, Deidara said as he tried to detonate them, the key word being tried. He repeatedly kept sending his chakra to the dragons to trigger the explosion that should have happened the first time, but to no avail. He repeatedly failed. Why can't I? He took a closer look at his dragons and noticed that those strange marks that covered Gaara were snaking their way on his creations. Those marks. They somehow immobilize my dragons and prevent me from detonating them. Looks like things have shifted from my favor. The dragons roared in agony before they crumbled into tiny sand particles that sat on Gaara's clawed hand. Deidara clicked his tongue in distaste at the scene before he pulled his left sleeve back and summoned a scroll. He unsealed the scroll and formed a couple of hand signs. Shirwan, Tori no Fukusu no Mure. Multiple puffs of smoke appeared as Deidara summoned hundreds of clay birds in a variety of shapes and sizes. Shirwan, Arakura Bakudan Pareto. Deidara started moving his hands at amazing speeds, sending bird after Gaara. His grin stretched across his face, threatening to split it as he kept on the offensive. Gaara moved around in the sky, avoiding all the birds Deidara sent and countered with sand bullets he fired from his hand. To the villagers watching, it looked like a festival as each explosion lit up the night sky with brilliant flashes of fire. Gaara dove under a swarm of the remaining and sent out miniature tendrils of sand from his fingers to pierce each and every one of the birds, causing a string of explosions to go off. Just as he executed his technique, Deidara targeted Gaara with his dragon, attempting to ram into the sand user, yet he was sadly mistaken as spears of sand came out of his opponent's back. The spears shot towards Deidara, forcing him to cancel his plans and dodge unless he wanted to get maimed or worse, his dragon getting hit and exploding under him. However, what he failed to notice was the spears turning around before merging into a stream of sand. What the dash! The stream of sand latched on both of Deidara's arms and pinned him down to his dragon, restricting his movement. He screamed in pain as he felt the sand crushing his arms. Gaara jumped off his vortex of sand. I'm ending this fight now, Gaara declared to himself as he was flying straight for Deidara, who couldn't do anything. Psycho Zedai Kogiki, Shikaku no Hoko. Gaara's hand emitted red chakra as the sand covering his hand shifted into a jagged spear covered in his tenant's curse marks. This is the end of you. Gaara roared as rolled above Deidara's dragon and dived towards them in a great display of ability, going through both Deidara and the clay dragon. Gaara commanded the remaining sand on his body to make a platform in front of him and landed kneeling down on one knee. Boom! A great explosion went off behind Gaara, signaling the defeat of one of the strongest opponents he had ever faced in his life. He sat on his knee trying to catch his breath. Normally, he wouldn't have been so easily winded, yet normally he never had to move around and push his body to the limit. Because of his technique, his chakra was nearly depleted. Gaara exhaled, releasing the breath he had unknowingly held captive within his lungs. He closed his eyes and was going to go back to his office and rest a bit before handling the paperwork that was sure to be on his desk with reports of the damages done to the village from his fight with Deidara. It's finally over, he said, lowering his sand slowly. However, his breath hitched, and he froze in shock as heard a voice he didn't want to hear above him. I wouldn't be so sure about that, HN. Gaara turned his head to the source of the speaker, and to his disbelief, Deidara stood on top of a bird similar to the one he used when he first faced the Kazekage completely unscathed. But how? Gaara questioned. He just couldn't believe how his opponent could have survived his strongest technique. You couldn't have survived that. That was my strongest technique. You couldn't have countered that. Gaara thought hard as his brain tried to process his opponent's sudden revival. There's no way he took that technique full force and lived. Unless... You're right, Deidara said. I wouldn't have been able to survive that even with all the C1 and C2 techniques I have, that is, if I was actually there to face it. Deidara formed a miniature clone of himself from the clay he had in his hand. Of course, he switched himself with a clone of clay, but when? Down below in Sunagakure, Baki, one of Gaara's most trusted advisors and leading jonin, was organizing the ninja and re-establishing Sunagakure defense. Summon the council immediately, he ordered. Yes, sir. A black-haired ninja vanished on Baki's orders. You, he said, pointing at another ninja. Take 2 squads and secure the reservoir. Now. On it. Seal the roads on Sector A, there may be more than one enemy. Now I don't give a damn what happens, I want each and every one of you poised and ready. Half of the ninja around him dispersed, initiating his orders. Medical Corps, start setting up a barrier with all non-combatants inside, ASAP. I don't want to hear of another casualty, are we clear? Yes, sir. His men chanted in unison. All of the remaining shinobi rounded around on each and every rooftop prepared to hit Deidara with everything they had. Baki stared on into the sky, watching as Gaara sat on one knee. We're here to fight for you, Gaara. We won't let anyone lay a hand on our Kazakage or our village, Baki proclaimed, arousing his fellow Sunanin. Deidara looked down at Sunagakure and couldn't help but smirk as he saw hundreds, if not thousands of Suna shinobi ready to attack him. Humph, looks like your friends are about to butt in on our little fight again. He turned back to see Gaara staring back at him with his cold, emotionless eyes. Deidara chuckled as he pulled out a humanoid figure of clay with its arms folded over its stomach and its mouth opened wide. Honestly, I enjoyed myself tonight. Fighting you was much more fun than I thought it'd be, and I wish I could savor the feeling of defeating you with everything I had. But I'm afraid this is where it ends. Despite all of that, I am tired of that expressionless face of yours, Deidara proclaimed, ready to toss in his technique. However, all of that came to a stop. A low rumbling could soon be heard from the sky. A presence of power could be felt around the area that caused both the Mad Bomber and the Jinchuriki of Shikaku to stop their onslaught against each other. The sound below was vibrating intensely, causing alarm to the shinobi and panic amongst the civilians that had been watching the titanic fight between the rogue shinobi and their leader. The presence had slowly died down from the shinobi who could sense it, and the vibrations had dwindled to non-existent, causing all parties on ground to relax for a brief moment. It was only until the vibrations returned and ignited to a greater level that had occurred just moments ago. The ground continued to rumble and quake, as if an earthquake were moving through. The alleged force of nature continued to act, and soon the results of its actions were shown. The ground had quickly split and contorted several yards, the hard sandy earth rising as the shifting of the ground continued. Shinobi panicked. Some grabbed civilians and pushed them into safety while others leaped out to avoid the clumped rocks and trying to avoid falling into the now hollowed earth. The sand flew out around the general area, covering the broader area of the village center. The brown cloud mass had blinded the sight of everyone and soon, all was quiet. For a brief moment, the area was silent. No one spoke, no one even dared to breathe, for it seemed as though time itself had come to a complete halt. The silence was then broken as a guttural sound echoed from deep beneath the earth where the rumbling seismic waves had originated from. The red-haired Kazekage looked down at the massive cloud of sand that formed in the center of his village. What the? He never had time to complete his own thought as the growl increased in volume, until it finally developed into one of the most terrifying sounds that any person, civilian and shinobi alike, in Sambikyu no Sato had ever heard in their entire lives. It was loud. It was powerful. It was positively frightening to all but a select few. The powerful, thunderous roar that erupted forth from the sands pierced the souls of some of the most battle-hardened men of the shinobi village, for even they did not know what else to feel when faced with such an unknown sound. Not to mention that a powerful shockwave had formed, accompanying the roar as it tore through the village. The winds generated made it seem as if a hurricane was passing through the shinobi village, destroying buildings, making them crumble and taking the citizens of Suna down along with them as they made their descent to ground zero. In addition to that, the burst of sound was strong enough to send the civilians and shinobi alike flying across the village. Gaara grunted, covering his face as he was pushed back from the force while he was in the air. He held himself firmly aloft with his sand cloud until the roar itself had soon died down. He opened his eyes once more as turned his gaze down toward the village. His eyes widened and a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead as he saw what had erupted out of the clearing. Chills rolled down his spine as he gazed upon the form within the dispersed sand cloud. A beast? A monster? An animal? Gaara didn't know what to label it as, but one thing was for certain. It was powerful. Its very arrival had now reduced a large area of land within his village to a massive crater that was several kilometers in diameter. His pale green eyes looked over the strange monster's body, starting from the base of its feet where 4 large claws were present. Its feet led to large and powerful legs which were obviously very heavily muscled. From there, Gaara continued to adjust his head upwards and he found the beast to be at a towering height, reaching at nearly 220 feet in height in its current quadrupedal state. From the tip of its nose to the tip of the tail, the beast was nearly 380 feet in length. The creature's black-scaled body made it seem like it could blend into the night, but the yellow spikes that protruded from its back, similar to how a porcupine's were, like protective plating, and the tip of its tail made it clearly noticeable to the naked eye. While the features of the primary parts of its body seemed to be intimidating, the features upon its head were menacing in itself. The beast held a crest of protruding curved horns on its head like a crown. It held a thick, sharp horn on the tip of its nose, and its teeth seemed as if they were longer and sharper than any sword in the elemental nations. All of these sharp and pointy weapons of the creature all gained a shine as they reflected the moonlight. A low growl emanated from the creature's throat as a stream of hot air was released out of its mouth. Saliva dropped from its jaws as it had landed on the ground and caused a deep pool of liquid to land in the crater. Its fearsome, black eyes moved around, looking around the vicinity as it stared at the fearful humans below before smelling the sulfur of the explosions of the air. It slowly shifted its head upward as it looked at the 2 individuals above. It once more gave a low snarl before it increased in volume. The beast turned its head skyward and the powerful roar from its throat sent a powerful shockwave toward Gaara and Deidara, and seemed to shake both heaven and earth. Deidara grunted as his clay dragon was pushed back from the roar. He gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes down at the beast. What is that thing? I've never seen anything like it. The size of it is almost as big as old man Rashi's transformation. His eyes looked back to the Kazekage and then back once more at the beast below and smirked. His hand moved into his clay pouch as the mouth in his hand consumed the clay, chewing as it was taking shape. This beast, the mass of it alone rivals that of Bijou. I'll need to scare it off. The mouth opened up and released a clay piece in the shape of a bird. He dropped the bird down upon the beast. He made a sign, and quickly a puff of smoke ignited, and the once small clay bird was now a bird the size of a horse coming down towards the beast. Gaara's eyes widened as he saw the bird launching down like a guided missile. No! He yelled out in panic, moving the sand on the ground in front of the beast so that the bomb would not antagonize the creature. Unfortunately, he had reacted far too slowly, and thus his sand had missed the avian explosive by a few centimeters. However, that was enough as the bomb had detonated upon reaching the creature's face with an explosion that seemed to make the earth shake. A large cloud of sand formed as a result of the explosion, and Deidara had a victorious smirk on his face. You insolent fool! Gaara snapped, his mask of calm breaking. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Deidara ignored the Kage and grinned widely as the blast itself cleared up. However, unlike an injured beast like he had expected, the spiked monster was completely unharmed. No burns, no bruises, no sand in its eyes. The beast seemed to be unaffected by the attack, physically. Emotionally, now that was a different story. The massive beast's lips curled upwards to bare its sharp teeth in the form of a ferocious snarl. Its eyes dilated, and its breathing became heavier, and quickly its hide turned into a shade of red that signified its rage. It gave a mighty bellow that reached the walls of the village and destroyed the front portion of the front wall and village with ease, killing any shinobi that were at the guard post at the frontal sector. It rose up on its hind legs as it rushed forward and prepared to launch itself in the air. However, it was stalled in its preparation as its lower body was quickly covered in sand. Gaara grunted as he pushed more sand upon the massive animal's body so he could subdue it for the safety of the villagers and the safety of his village. He desperately didn't need to worry about both an Akatsuki member and an enraged beast at once. Once he seemed to have entrapped the beast in sand, he lowered his hand and narrowed his eyes. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but I'll need to deal with you later after this is dealt with," he said as he turned back to the Akatsuki member a few yards away from him. Boom! The explosion had caught Gaara immediately off guard as he looked back down the village only to see a massive body coming toward him within second. The shape of the animal that was once subdued briefly was now like that of a wrecking ball, spinning violently upon the ground as it launched itself into the air at high velocity, coming towards Deidara and Gaara. "Shit!" Deidara cried out as he leapt off of the clay dragon as massive spikes shredded the clay beast with ease. Deidara used what little explosive clay he had in his pouch to summon the large clay bird once again, which he safely landed on. As the bird moved away from the vicinity, Deidara looked up at the creature as the spherical shape that it took was turning as its tucked arms, legs, head, and tail all moved and took back the form of the creature once more. Deidara frowned as he stared at the creature that seemed to have drifted in midair. "This creature is causing enough trouble for me to capture the Jinchuriki. If this keeps up, I'll need to escape without my claim." His eyes slightly widened as he noticed the creature staring back at him and giving him a low snarl as it prepared its descent. Deidara gritted his teeth before he blinked and looked at Gaara and the distance between him and the beast. A light smirk grooved up upon the mad bomber's face as he flew up in between the two. "On the other hand, this can work into my favor." The clay bird picked up speed as it glided higher up into the air, the beast taking notice of the rogue IWA shinobi attempting to fly above him curled into a partial ball, leaving only its tail out as it spun once more and directed its tail at where the mad bomber may appear up towards. Gaara narrowed his eyes, bringing the sand around him as he formed a cloud of sand above him as it clouded up together. Suna Shigyur. The sand cloud quickly shot out bullets of hardened sand down toward the member of Akatsuki. Deidara smirked as he dove around the sand, the bird curving as it coordinated itself in the air to avoid the heavy fire of lethal sand. The clay bird built enough speed as it then performed one powerful flap of its wings before taking on a streamlined position, launching above the cloud and the Kazekage. Gaara frowned before he saw the view in his peripheral vision beginning to darken. He averted his eyes toward the shadow. His eyes slowly widened as he saw the tail of the large reptile come toward him, just mere meters away from him. The sand instinctively moved as fast as it could to protect Gaara or at least reduce the incoming damage that the Kazekage would receive, forming a shield, but time was not available for it to complete its task. The massive tail broke through the layer of sand with ease and the blunt side of the tail smashed right into Gaara's form. His body seemed to meld with the shape of the tail. His body curving in an arch time seemed to slow down for him before his body registered the force of the attack. He zoomed through the air and slammed into the ground with devastating impact, now lying within a crater. The Godain Kazekage was now out like a light as he laid there heavily battered. Gaara's sand armor crumpled, his forehead and right arm bleeding due to the blow he received. The young redhead remained motionless before his body was being consumed and put into the clay bird's mouth. Deidara gave a prideful smirk as his mission, which possibly would have ended in failure, turned into success. "Gotta admit, Kazekage, you had me a few times, but my art and my intuition won this battle, HN," he said as he patted the bird. The bird spread its wings once more, but the ground suddenly shook beneath its feet. Deidara looked over from afar and saw the heavy dust cloud that appeared in front of the broken village wall. The sand cloud blew away as the dinosaur-like beast launched out of the cloud, thundering across the desert landscape towards the mad bomber. "Oh, for the love of Kami-sama!" the blonde cried out as the clay bird launched itself into the air as it flew into the sky in high speeds. The beast roared as it followed after the bird, releasing short bursts of speed as it tried to catch up, but as the bird flew higher into the air, the animal soon lost sight of the Akatsuki member. The monster dug its claws into the sands, tearing a massive trench as it skidded to a halt. Its black eyes shone with the light of the moon as it looked to the sky. Its nostrils flared as it caught the cold desert winds and then, it began sniffing. A myriad of scents filled its nasal canals before it caught onto the scent it wished to follow. It huffed and gave a low growl as its lips curled upwards to reveal what could only be described as a grin of some sorts as it caught the scent of the mad bomber. Soon afterwards it shoveled the sand beneath its feet, and it burrowed down into the ground in the wake of the night, leaving the path of destruction it had laid upon the village and the land itself. Kanahigaku no Sato 5 hours later. Crack! Blue eyes opened from meditation as Naruto broke out of concentration from his training with the sense of dread coming off his body. He looked over to the glass of water that was on his coffee table and at the crack which reached down the middle of the glass. Eyes narrowed as the blonde looked out the window and frowned. Is something the matter, Naruto? Kamina's voice broke out as the kaiju looked at the blonde's mental form within the boy's consciousness. I don't know, something just doesn't feel right. It's almost as if something happened and that I need to be there. Kamina raised his head from his laying down position. The Raijuu smirked as it began looking into the eyes of the blonde, seeing the view around him from the blonde's sight. The smirk that once graced his face turned into a frown. The fates gave you an omen. A warning, I suppose you could say. The wolf-like creature stated. I suppose so. Naruto thought he was raised up to his feet as he walked over to the window as he stared at the darkness of the night sky. A warning of what I want to know. A light knock from his front door caught his attention as he walked over and opened the door. Kakashi stood in front of him now, with a solemn look upon his face, but his lone eye seemed to still be focused on Naruto. Naruto, I need you to pack your gear and get ready for a mission debriefing in Tsunade's office. Kakashi told the blonde. The voice he held seemed to be serious. A mission? The blonde questioned. It felt too much of a coincidence with the supposed omen with Kakashi soon following. Naruto narrowed his eyes before asking a simple question, holding his concern within himself. Kakashi's eyes furrowed as he stared at the freshly made jonin. A few hours ago one of Suna's emergency falcons came to the mission post. The bird held a detailed scroll about the situation that happened in Suna. Suna has requested aid from both Konoha and Kiri to help rebuild and to be tasked for an S-ranked mission. Naruto's eyes widened slightly as he stared at the silver-haired man. Suna was attacked? Was Gaara okay? It was Akatsuki. It wasn't a question, it was more of a confirmation to him than anything else. He knew it was the Akatsuki. If the attack on Suna was abrupt and severe enough for them to come seek the aid of two major villages, then that must have meant the Akatsuki had already begun their assault on attempting to gather the Jinchuriki. Kakashi nodded. Numerous eyewitnesses, remaining anonymous in the report from Suna, identified the attacker as Deidara aka the Mad Bomber, a missing nin from Iwagakure no Sado. He was wearing the same cloak that Itachi and Kisame were wearing when we first encountered Akatsuki. This only confirms that they had started hunting the other Jinchuriki. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. They captured Gaara, Naruto. Naruto was silent for a brief moment. It felt like 100 emotions sparked within him as time ceased around him. Memories flashed before him with Gaara and him, their fight during the invasion of Sound, the mission to retrieve Sasuke, and their times during his training where he came to Suna. All those memories, the emotions inside him slowly build up, only for them to bring something he hadn't felt before. Something he couldn't describe in his entire life that he had lived. He remained silent before he quietly, but calmly spoke, "Thank you for telling me, Kakashi-sensei. I'll meet you in the debriefing shortly." Kakashi stared at his student, scanning his body for any falter. When he couldn't find anything, he nodded as he disappeared into a gust of leaves. Kamina looked at the blonde as Naruto's mental body had been glowing with a blue aura as he subconsciously gripped his fist in fury. Eyes glazed over with a bright blue glow in his eyes. Naruto! The Raijuu called out as he stared at the silent blonde. Naruto, answer me, he said softly, his voice not reaching the blonde's ears. Kurama stared behind his cage as he frowned at the news. But his eyes mainly focused upon his tenant with deep concentration. His tenant was enraged at the capture of his friend, who bore the burden of holding the annoyance of a tanuki called Shikaku. Kurama couldn't handle the attitude of the weakest Bijuu, how they both bumped heads with each other even when they were created by their father. Yet despite the bitter rivalry and angst against one another, Kurama felt kinship with the tanuki. Knowing this, he could understand what was going through the blonde's mind, as he felt the same deep down with how he was feeling with his younger sibling being taken. Naruto may have looked like he was calm on the outside, but Kurama knew that deep down inside, he was furious. The once calm night sky of Konoha soon became overcast. Thunder rumbled and the wind slowly picked up. Chapter 16: Hunt for the Red Dawn. Kazekage Tower Sunagekyo no Sato. There is a saying that after the storm there is devastation that reeks over a land off suffering. In this case, discord in the community when the leader of the largest village in the country, along with the destruction of large buildings, and deaths of shinobi enforcers due to a mad bomber and pissed-off gigantic lizard is the post-aftermath of the shit storm that Suna had been left with. With no leader to maintain order, the council was trying to maintain the control of the village by supporting the civilian contractors by lending shinobi troops to reconstruct the buildings within the interior section of the village and help solidify the barricade around the village once more. Unfortunately, that reconstruction would be impossible with the sudden introduction of storm clouds that had appeared in the once hot dry sky of the village that was in the Kaze no Kuni. What were once sky blue eyes had become cold and became a powerful electric blue as they stared silently upon the village as he was gazing down in village, seeing the line of people that surrounding the damaged areas, men helping in the support of reconstruct, civilian women bringing food and beverages to the men and women working. Naruto watched outside the hospital window as he and the rest of his squad waited for Sakura to complete her treatment for the poison that was within Kankuro's system. To say that he was relieved that they made it to Suna a day early was an understatement. He was downright furious to the core. If it were up to him, he would have rushed there within hours to make it in time to try and save his brother Jinchuriki. Of course, he was set on limitations. He needed to be assigned to rescue Gaara, which he was, but he was also limited due to the group he was with. He couldn't move as fast without leaving them behind. He wasn't worried about Kakashi or Foot to make pace. Kakashi was an experienced war veteran, as well as a former ANBU captain. Vigorous physical training, especially speed and stamina, were key points to in Black Ops training. As for Foot, she was a Jinchuriki like him. While she wasn't as fast as him, she had the stamina and chakra reserves to maintain high amounts of speed and continue without sleep for days. Even Temari, whom they had met up with, wasn't too much of a worry with stamina issue. She lived in a harsh desert environment, and could adapt to highly volatile situations where she could carry on despite a lack of sleep due to the importance of a mission as a jonin. It wasn't the limitations of the group, but the limits that his Pinkett teammate had due to not being in a high-ranked mission such as this. Though they made it a day earlier than anticipated, it aggravated Naruto to no end because a moment of time being wasted inside the village meant that the Akatsuki was 1 minute closer from taking Shikaku entirely out of Gaara. Temari looked out the window as she stared up at the storm clouds. It is so strange. Kakashi looked up from his little green book for a moment as he stared at the Suna Jonin. What is it? This weather, it is so highly unusual in Kaze no Kuni. The kunoichi stared at the drizzling rain and listened to the sound of thunder. We only get rain at least 1 week in the rain cycle, heavy rain that gives us enough drinking water into our water filtering systems to last us for 2 years. Enough water stored in cacti or water reservoirs that are deep pocketed under the sand. We even go the closest country to get water. Makes sense, so what's wrong with this weather we have right now? Fo had cut in as looked back over to the window she sat in front of. It's not the rain cycle. The rain cycle here isn't for another 5 months, and secondly, this storm feels strange, because it feels like it has been following us all the way here. The dirty blonde said as she continued to stare. Kakashi looked out the window and hummed in his throat for a moment as he stared at the weather. Temari did have a point. Kakashi saw the random storm appear once he walked outside of the Hokage mansion for mission prep, and of course he shrugged it off at first. Now he wasn't so sure it was a coincidence. This storm was moving. Not because of climate change either, it was somehow alive. Perhaps it is Raijuu looking down upon us in favor, perhaps. Never be one to not speculate that the gods work in mysterious ways, you know? The silver-haired man said as a single cold-colored eye turned to the silent blonde student that he once had. He found the blonde's behavior strange as well. The last 2 days the blonde barely said anything, he hadn't made any brash remarks or angry rants. Perhaps the blonde was having an internal struggle within himself, or perhaps he was being professional. Either way, Kakashi felt that somehow if the aforementioned thunder god did bring said thunder, it was because of how Naruto was feeling right now. How spot on Kakashi was, he would never know. Sakura came out of the emergency room a few minutes later, taking the hairband off of her hair to once more let her hair down. With a sigh as I looked at the group, I managed to extract the poison out of him. He was lucky actually. If we came a day later he wouldn't have had a higher survival rate than he did now. Baki sighed in relief as he looked over to the Pinkette and gave her a light bow. Thank you Sakura-san for saving Kankuro. I am glad Tsunade-sama brought you to us. There is no need to thank me Baki-san. I am just glad we got the poison out of Kankuro. Plus with the poison at our disposal I can make an antidote to counteract this poison, she said as she took off the surgeon coat. It will take me a couple hours, but I am sure it will help us just in case. A few hours is something we do not have. Everyone looked over to the blonde as he was still looking over at the window. We need to get ready to move and take whatever leads right now on where the Akatsuki members were traveling towards. Sakura looked over to the blonde with narrowed eyes. Naruto, we just can't rush this, you know. We are dealing with an Akatsuki member who uses explosives and a puppeteer that uses poison-laced weapons. We need to be prep. So wait while I let Gaara die by the hands of people trying to hunt him, Fu and I down. He scoffed as he looked at her with cold eyes. You can stay behind and concoct your antidote. I'm going to go find Gaara, he said as he prepared to walk out the door. However, Kakashi went out to reach the blonde and grab his shoulder. Now wait just a second, Naruto. The moment his fingers touched Naruto's shoulder, he felt a sudden shock of electricity hit his fingertips. He recoiled slightly as he looked at the blonde before lowering his hand. Now I know you want to hurry and get to the priority of the mission, but we need to prepare for everything with what time we have. If we can spend at least 2 hours, then we can move forward with the mission directive. Naruto looked at the silver-haired veteran and smirked before he grunted. The door then opened to reveal a Suna shinobi coming in. Baki-san, the retrieval crew from Kiri has arrived for debriefing. Kiri? Kakashi questioned as he looked over to Baki. I was only to assume that you requested us in the retrieval of the young Kazekage. Baki looked over to Kakashi. Yes, but I assumed Tsunade-san would have notified you about the other group that was to join you. If you hadn't known, Kiri has made an alliance with us after they made an alliance with Konoha. If I am correct, it was due to the Chunin exams 2 years ago with a boy from Konoha taming one of their fiercest creatures and making a summoning pact with him. Fu thought about it for a minute before she went wide-eyed. She looked over to the blonde Uzumaki and leaned a bit closer to him to whisper in his ear. Naruto, he doesn't mean. Naruto raised his hand to stop her. Need to know basis, Fu. Not everyone needs to know my secrets. Naruto was a little curious as to whom Kiri had summoned forth to bring as their squadron. I wonder, for this mission they would have brought some of their finest, that would mean them. Well, would I know if it isn't that Uzumaki guy? The voice was too familiar for Naruto not to be brought out of his own thoughts. Naruto's eyes flashed deep blue once more before going back to being electrified. In front of him stood 3 familiar figures. One, of course, was who he remembered to be the gatekeeper of the demon's hunting ground during the Chunin exams in Kiri. Chojuro was his name if Naruto remembered correctly. Nothing much changed about the boy except he grew a few inches taller, and while his timid nature seemed to retain its hold on him, he did have an aura of power about him. Next was a fairly familiar figure, by far one of the few people who gave Naruto a run for his money during his lifetime. His black hair was sleek back, but still a little on the wild side. He wore a sleeveless red combat shirt with the symbol of the Urashima clan on the left side of his chest, and along his arm was a tattoo of Kiri's hunter squad, along with 2 seals. Around his waist was a black sash that had the Kiri Hittite in the front. He wore black martial arts pants along with the standard shinobi footing. The young man stood at least around Naruto's height of 5 feet 10 inches and carried himself with a slightly more muscular build as the blonde shinobi before him. Urashima Kito. Aren't you a sight for sore eyes? As soon as I heard about Kiri's group, I had my suspicions, but it looks like you confirmed it. the blonde said as he held out his hand, which the Kiri shinobi took firmly. Well, it seems you got a hell of a lot stronger when we last fought at the Chunin exams. I felt your battle spirit just reverberating throughout the whole area. Now gripping your hand, I can just feel that aura exuding out of you," he said with a mirthful grin. "It just makes me itch for another rematch in the future with you." "I definitely wouldn't mind that. You were one of the best I fought after all, though I have no doubt you will still be in the end," the blonde stated as he looked over to the last person of the Kiri group and smirked for a moment. Kagaya Shinji. The younger brother of Kimimaro had also undergone quite the growth spurt over the past few years, as he now stood at an identical height of 5 feet 10 inches. His build remained lean yet strong. His hair had also grown out to the point that it was tied into a loose ponytail that ended at his mid-back. His clothing consisted of a loose-fitting dark gray shirt with a dark blue obi wrapped around his waist, and a pair of dark blue pants that stopped just above his ankles. A pair of dark blue shinobi grade sandals adorned his feet, and his kirigakure hataite was stitched to his obi as if it were a belt buckle. If the color scheme of his outfit had changed to one consisting of various shades of purple, Naruto would have thought Shinji to be Kimimaro himself. Uzumaki. The last Kagaya nodded stiffly, his green eyes staring into Naruto's electric blue ones. "When this mission reaches its conclusion, I would also expect a rematch with you in the near future. And I'll be welcome to show you my Rasengan once again," the Kyuubi Jinchuriki replied, earning a snort of what Naruto assumed to be amusement from the Kagaya clan survivor. He could never tell with these emotionless asshole types, which was probably why he had so much trouble with trying to get a read on Sasuke in their early years. A single clearing of the throat from Baki got all forms of interaction down to zero, and all stood at attention before the acting Kazekage of Sunigakure. Baki sat at the desk, his visible eye seeming to stare into the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's soul. Kakashi stood a bit off to the side and looked at 3 other members that made up the new Team Kakashi. Naruto stood behind him while Fu and Sakura stood on either side of the blonde, but while they both were aware of the blonde's attack of impatience, Fu was the one who addressed it. She leaned over a bit and whispered in his ear. "Hey, you okay there, Goldilocks?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Just..." Naruto absent-mindedly pulled at the collar of his jacket. "We need to get to Gaara, and the more time we spend here waiting for the debriefing, the more time that's lost and the closer Akatsuki is going to get to extracting Shuko from him. Don't worry about it. I'm just as anxious as you to save our fellow Jinchuriki, but you need to keep a cool head. You listen to the mission details, we make our plan, and then we head out. Same old, same old." The Nanabai Jinchuriki smiled reassuringly at him. "You're a good person when you want to be, Moss Head." "Are you implying I'm not, Goldilocks?" The 2 Jinchuriki smiled at one another before turning back to face Baki. "I'm glad that you all could make it here today. Our allies in Konoha, Hatake Kakashi, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Fu, we are always grateful to have you by our sides." "Of course, Baki-san," Kakashi replied as he and his fellow Konoha shinobi nodded. Baki turned to the shinobi of Kiri. "And to our newly formed allies in Kiri, Chojuro, Kagaya Shinji, and Urashima Kito, we are also grateful for your support. We hope that your aiding us in this time of hardship will help strengthen our village's relationship with your own and allow for more exchanges between them." "As do we, Baki-sama," Chojuro stuttered before blushing in embarrassment at having done so. Shinji and Kei looked at the new generation member of the 7 Swordsmen with raised eyebrows. They had been working on his stuttering problem ever since they started being a team together, but it seemed his low level of self-confidence ran much deeper than they thought. "Now on to business." Baki's voice gained a stern tone to it, and the shinobi before him immediately straightened their postures. 2 days ago, under the cover of night, our village was hit by a terrorist attack. The culprit was a member of the group known as Akatsuki, and as you all aware, their goal appears to involve the bijou in some way. Our Godame Kazekage, Sabaka no Gaara, immediately took action and attacked the Akatsuki member who utilized some form of explosion jutsus involving clay objects. Gaara fought and was actually very close to winning, but the Akatsuki member performed an attack that threatened to destroy a large portion of the village, which would have generated a massive loss of Sunigakure lives. Gaara defended the village successfully, but it left him open to an attack and he was defeated before being taken away. Baki rose from his chair and looked out of the window, which gave quite an impressive view of the desert lands of Kaze no Kuni. Your mission is to find Gaara and retrieve him. Understood? Hi. The two groups of shinobi replied. Unacceptable. The shout seemed to echo throughout the office as it was accompanied by the sound of the door being slammed open. You aren't allowed to be in there. Baki-sama is having an important meeting and… The guard who was at the door was suddenly gripped by his ear lobe and harshly pulled down by the shorter person. Don't tell me what to do, boy. I was out fighting a war before you were even born. She roughly released the jounin, a yelp of pain being released as a result before the intruder stepped into the Kazekage's office. Said intruder was an elderly woman who was rather short, about as tall and just as old as Sarutobi Hiruzen when he was still alive, and had light-colored skin which was adorned with wrinkles and liver spots to signify just how old she actually was. Her hair was a dark shade of lavender with two large bangs which framed her face, and was tied up into a bun. A maroon-colored band was worn around her head. Her outfit consisted of an outfit that was common to the people of Sunagakure, which was a dark-colored, loose-fitting outfit with a poncho-like top. Her black eyes stared at the group of Konoha shinobi before they widened sharply upon meeting Kakashi. Konoha no Shiroi Kiba! She exclaimed. The elderly woman moved at a speed that did not reflect her age at all, having cleared the distance between them in what appeared to be a single step. However, as she went to strike Kakashi in the chest with a palm strike in tandem with a knee that would probably make him infertile, Naruto had taken the initiative to appear in front of his commanding officer and blocked the palm strike with right forearm while also drawing his blade from its sheath and blocking the knee with the flat of the blade. Fu and Sakura immediately drew kunai and rushed over to the woman's side, holding the gray steel to her carotid arteries. Make another move on Kakashi-sensei and you die here, Obachan. Fu growled out. The elderly woman ignored her, her icy glare still focused on the mask-wearing jounin. Shiroi Kiba, you will pay for taking my son and daughter-in-law away from me. You left my grandson an orphan, and I will put you down like the dog you are. She snapped. Kakashi's sweat dropped, and waved his hands in a feeble form of defense. Actually, I'm not him. Shiroi Kiba was my father, Tsukumo. I'm his son, Kakashi. The killing intent from the old woman died away as she blinked in confusion. Son? She narrowed her eyes before laughing loudly. Era, my mistake. The years are really catching up to me if I can't even tell the difference between you and your father. You're far too young, and your father, much taller. Yes, much taller. This bitch. Kakashi thought with a deadpan stare. Kakashi-sensei, who is this woman? Sakura asked. The answer came to the pink-haired medic meme from Baki's mouth as the tan-skinned man sighed in exasperation. I apologize for this rude intrusion, but to answer your question, Haruno-san, this is Chiyo-sama. She was a master poison user. I'm not dead nor am I incapable, Baki. Chiyo corrected sharply. You young ones have no more respect for your elders these days. My apologies, Chiyo-sama. Baki bowed his head, but it was obvious holding himself back from losing it. Fu could not help but pity the stand-in Kazekage. If it had been her dealing with the old bat currently, she would already be in the middle of a screaming match. As I was saying, Chiyo-sama is a master poison user dating back to when Tsunade-sama was still in her prime. She was a lethal weapon on the battlefield during the Second Great Shinobi World War. She was also the first person to ever devise an antidote for Sasho no Hanzo. And I would have continued to be a deadly bringer of death in the eyes of Konoha, but then that annoying slug princess started improving. Antidote after antidote, she counteracted every single one of my poisons. The elder of Suna huffed. I understand your frustrations, Chiyo-sama, but we are still making preparations to go and retrieve Kazekage-sama. You cannot barge in here as you please. We are currently in a state of emergency, and you making such a large amount of panic is not going to help matters. Chiyo rolled her eyes. And neither will it help if we continue to employ the usage of outside resources to deal with Sunagakure problems. Suna has lost its Kazekage, and that is a Suna problem which should be handled by Suna shinobi. Even back when I was capable of fighting on the war front, Tsunegekure no Sato was always seen as the weakest of the Great Five. 2 wars in over 30 years, and nothing has changed it seems as we still cry to our allies for help. Konoha, the home of that annoying slug princess, and now we are even reaching out to Kiri of all places. You reach out across a body of water for allies? What are you trying to do, Baki? I am trying to get our Kazekage back, he snapped. Our morale is at a low, and we cannot let Kumo or IWA know that we are missing our leader. With Konoha being our closest ally, we would obviously reach out to them, and ever since the Mizukage began reaching out to the other hidden villages, Kazekage-sama had decided to take her up on her offer for an alliance. Suna cannot afford to look weak in this time of crisis, Chiyo-sama. So unless you have a better idea regarding how we can get back Gaara, then by all means, share it. Baki panted, having practically shouted out his frustrations in one breath. His eyes then widened as he caught sight of the elder's narrowed eyes and he gulped. I apologize, Chiyo-sama. I don't know what came over me, Oh hush, Baki. I just wanted to test you to see if you really had Suna's best interests at heart when you made the call out to our allies. Chiyo patted the taller man on his cheek. You really would have made a fine Kazekage. And as to make a suggestion regarding your last point, I would like to recommend that I come along with these little ones. But what about your brother? What about being an advisor? I'm a woman of the battlefield and I still have a great deal of battle lust in me. Sarutobi Hiruzen's not the only to have had fighting skills even when he moved past his prime. She chuckled. As for my brother, tell him I'll be back in a while to save our brat of a Kazekage. Baki's face gave off an uncomfortable expression. He was acting Kazekage, but Chiyo was, well, she wasn't the most obedient of people. The dark-eyed man sighed in resignation. Very well. However, as a condition for accompanying our allies on this mission, you will obey Hatake Kakashi's orders as he will be its leader. Understood? Clear as crystal, my boy. The lavender-haired puppet master replied. She turned and smiled at the silver-haired jounin before her. I look forward to working with you, Hatake Taishu. Could she be any more sarcastic? The other occupants thought. So how are we supposed to track the Kazekage? Kito asked. Kakashi-sensei and I have a pretty advanced sense of smell. In addition to that, Kakashi-sensei has a summoning contract with the dogs, so I would suggest we track Gaara's scent and follow it. Naruto said. I'm afraid that it's practically impossible to track Gaara by scent. Baki said. While Gaara does go beyond the village walls and beyond the borders of Kaze no Kuni, the sand armor which he constantly covers himself in would give him the scent of the desert and sand. If it were in any other landscape, searching for him by scent would definitely be well recommended. However, given that we are currently within the desert itself, the probability of being able to isolate Gaara's exact scent is next to nothing, seeing as how his natural scent is always obscured by the sand armor. Then how do you propose we track him and the Akatsuki down? Fu asked. Baki reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of black cloth that was held within a clear, small, plastic bag. After Gaara had been taken by the Akatsuki, Kankuro moved to pursue. He came into contact with what I can assume to be either a partner to the explosives user Gaara battled, or just another member of the Akatsuki. Akasuna no Sasori. Chiyo's eyes narrowed and she sucked her teeth. So my darling grandson is in league with those mongrels, is he? The eyes of Kiri and Konoha Shinobi widened at that comment. Grandson? Indeed. Sasori is Chiyo-sama's grandson, and he is proficient in handling poisons just like her. Kankuro fought him in an attempt to continue pursuing Gaara, but that attempt ended in failure as he was poisoned. We thank you again, Harino-san. Baki nodded to the emerald-eyed student of Tsunade, and she nodded in return. However, it wasn't a complete failure as Kankuro managed to rip off this piece of Sasori's uniform using his puppet, Karasu. And it should have Sasori's scent, which means we could follow it back to whatever base of operations they retreated to. Sakura exclaimed. Your powers of deduction are second to none. Naruto deadpanned. Sakura stuck her tongue out at him like the mature kunoichi that she was before reacting to catch the plastic bag as Baki tossed it to her. I wish you all luck on your mission, Baki stated. You're dismissed. Tawa no Kuni. The scent of Sasori's cloth led the group of Konoha and Kiri shinobi back across the desert, which they had already spent numerous hours navigating through to get to the border, and through the forest lands which lay beyond said border. With the aid of Naruto, Kakashi and Pakken, the group found themselves remaining hidden within the shadows of the tree line which outlined one of the many rocky valleys of Tawa no Kuni. The massive river that flowed below acted as white noise as all eyes were focused on what lay on the other side of the river. Embedded into the rock was a massive boulder that lay within a red torii. Gaara's scent ends at boulder. Pakken stated in his deep voice. Thanks for your help, Pakken. We'll take it from here. The brown pug gave a salute with his front paw before vanishing in a puff of white smoke, returning to the realm of summoning animals. What do we do from here, Hataki-san? Chojuro asked. The Seven Swordsmen member looked to his commanding officer nervously as he adjusted his glasses. There's probably some traps or some form of protection by that gate. Kakashi raised his hitai to uncover the Sharingan eye that lay beneath. The tomo spun slowly within his crimson iris as he studied the boulder and torii with great detail. After a few moments of silence, the Konoha Jounin covered the eye of his fallen teammate once more. There was a genjutsu over the boulder and torii, and there's a rather intricate layer of fuinjutsu covering it. Being the student of Namikaze Minato, I have dabbled in the art, but those seals are beyond my ability. Fuinjutsu is a rather rare style of the shinobi arts, and the only clan of masters is extinct, Shinji stated. We aren't extinct. The Raijuu holder corrected the Kagaya clan survivor. Are you telling us that you actually know Fuinjutsu Uzumaki? Kito asked. The taijutsu master got a rather cocky-looking smirk as his reply. I actually managed to learn a great deal about Fuinjutsu when I was training over the course of these few years, he replied before focusing on his fellow jounin. Kakashi-sensei, can you describe the seal you saw? Or maybe draw it back for me? Kakashi nodded his head before taking out an empty scroll and an ink brush from his weapons pouch. With amazing speed and dexterity, the ability of the Sharingan to grant photographic memory was quite paramount as Kakashi recreated the image of the seal he saw on the entrance to the Akatsuki's base of operations, albeit it was on a smaller scale. Naruto hummed in thought as he looked at the seal. Simple square matrix. Pretty stable with the chain link seals holding it together, but they keep it fortified with these two seals here. He pointed at the two large kanji which lay within smaller squares within the larger sealing formula itself. One had the kanji 4 left, and the other with the kanji 4 right. What's so important about those two? Phil and Sakura asked. Those two seals are essentially the locks for the door. The locks are held in place within a certain range because when crafting this type of protection seal, if the key seals are too far out of range for the seal formula to register, the entire seal collapses and it becomes useless. Given the size of the seal formula that the Akatsuki is using, I'd venture to say that the key seals are a few hundred meters away. The keys would be tethered to the lock formulas by a thin film of chakra, so that way they'd be able to remain in contact with each other. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki explained. So we break the lock formulas and then we're in? Sounds simple enough, Kito commented. Knowing the Akatsuki though, they wouldn't be so slack so as to leave those key formulas unguarded. Not to mention that because there are two of them, we'll have to divide our resources. The Sharingan holder informed his team as he activated his Sharingan once more to follow the chakra tether lines Naruto had spoken about. Sure enough, thin lines of blue chakra flowed along the edge of the river, one going left and the other going to the right. The tethers go on for about 300 meters in either direction, so we'll break up into two teams. Team A will consist of Naruto, Chio-san, Shinji and myself. We will head for the key formula to the right. Team B, Sakura, Fu, Chojuro and Kei, you four will take the left side. Hi! With Team A. The two Konoha shinobi, one Kiri shinobi and one Suna Kunoichi had quickly covered the necessary 300 meters to reach the anchor that the first lock formula had been tethered to. It was a sizable piece of stone that was located in the center of a clearing. The clearing's circumference was completely surrounded by the trees of the forest they had had to navigate in order to reach their destination. The anchor for the lock was decorated with a very complicated array of kanji that seemed to wrap around the stone like chains, a seal tag with the kanji 4 lock being slapped onto the face of said stone. The 4 shinobi of Team A looked around, surveying the surrounding tree line for any sort of ambush. I don't sense anything, Shinji stated after a moment of releasing a few steady pulses of chakra. The echolocation technique was repeated by both Chiyo and Naruto himself. Neither do I, Naruto and Chiyo stated simultaneously. Are you sure we aren't missing anything? Chiyo asked. If my adorable grandson was the one who would set these traps, or lack thereof, then I'm quite disappointed in him. Wouldn't this be the ideal situation, Chiyo-san? Shinji asked with a raised eyebrow. The poison mistress chuckled at the Kagaya clan survivor. As ideal as it is, Sasori is still my family and I raised him to be a better shinobi than this. The lavender-haired woman clicked her tongue. Such a shame. His poisons are magnificent, as are his puppets, but to let himself fall short in terms of trap-making. Kakashi-sensei, do you see anything? The Kyuubi Jinchuriki asked. The Sharingan spun slowly in his eye socket as it looked around for any sort of genjutsu or for the chakra of any enemy ninja that would be within the vicinity. I don't see anything, Naruto. Kakashi moved to pull his Hatai back over the transplanted visual organ, but he paused as he suddenly felt a spike in chakra. All members of the 4-man group shifted into fighting stances as the wind picked up. The leaves rustled, a large number of them breaking free and riding the air currents. The howls of the winds were then accompanied by the cawing of what they assumed to be a flock of ravens. The birds in question appeared in their respective fields of vision before they all converged at a single point. The ravens melded into one another before solidifying. Look down at the ground. Now! Kakashi ordered. The others were too quick to follow as they glanced at the ground, but still held their opponent's feet in view. You are quite a quick wit, Hatake Kakashi. Naruto's eyes widened as he recognized the voice of the man that now stood before them. Naruto-kun. It's been a while since our last encounter. I trust Jiraiya-sama has prepared you for the eventual clash that you will have with my organization. Uchiha Itachi. His hands clenched into tight fists, the wind growing wilder and dark, cumulonimbus clouds beginning to swirl overhead. Uchiha Itachi? Chiyo exclaimed. You mean the boy who wiped out the Uchiha clan single-handedly? The very same, Chiyo-sama. Sasori-san spoke quite highly of you when he joined us and gave our leader the information on his village. Itachi said before turning to Shinji. As for you, I do not know who you are, shinobi of Kiri, but with my partner being from that particular village, I do know enough to recognize that trademark hair color and skin markings. I never would have thought to see a Kagaya clan member this deep into the mainland. To think they'd send out the Itachi of all people to be the one to guard this lock seal. Naruto thought. And we didn't even feel his presence until those ravens appeared. Is the gap between myself and the other Akatsuki still so large? Hardly. Kamina encouraged his student. As skilled as this Uchiha brat is, he is far from being outside of the sensory capabilities of myself and Kurama. He is skilled though to pull off such a high-level genjutsu. I am not aware of any humans that were capable of drawing upon animal familiars to then craft a body. The Raijuu is correct, Kit. He literally appeared out of thin air, and you are aware of my ability to sense negative emotions on a wide scale. Kurama added. Those ravens are forged by genjutsu, but there is a body in there. However, it is much, much weaker than how it was the day we first came across him during that mission with your perverted godfather to look for the drunken woman that became your Godame Hokage. If I were to make an estimate, it feels like only 10% of the Uchiha's power is being exerted currently. Do you think he could be holding back? I have learned how to repress my chakra signature during my training. It is possible, but do not let your guard down around an Uchiha. Kamina growled softly. I want that boy's head on a spike. Now strike. Kurama roared. I will not have my Jinchuriki be a coward in the face of those disgusting eyes. Attack! The wind was now bordering on becoming akin to that of a storm's. Lightning flashed and thunder followed soon after as Naruto took a few steps towards Itachi. Naruto, get back! You can't handle him on your own, Kakashi exclaimed. There's something off about Itachi, Naruto stated. I can't tell what it is exactly, but he's not as strong as he normally is. I think I can handle him, but if you think something will go wrong, then look for an opening and attack. Otherwise, this team is mine. Raijuu arc, Raime. The silver-haired man's cry was drowned out as Naruto took off in a spark of lightning, a thunderclap echoing throughout the clearing as he did so. Itachi's eyes widened slightly as Naruto reappeared, the sparks of blue voltage jumping off of his form as he reared back his right arm. You've gotten faster, the Sharingan master commented as he stepped off to the side, avoiding the powerful strike. Naruto landed on the ground and spun on his heels to go into a sweeping kick that would knock Itachi's feet out from under him. But the former ANBU captain hopped over the attack before going into a backhand spring to gain some distance. He then gave what looked like a nod of approval as he noted Naruto's head was constantly being kept down, watching only his feet. You've learned to keep your eyes away from me. A very smart choice, but it can also be a dangerous tactic to employ when facing me, Naruto-kun. Itachi drew a shuriken from his weapon's pouch. He hurled the Star of Steel before making a single-hand sign. Ninpu, Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. The chakra that flowed through the shuriken allowed it to multiply rapidly, the one shuriken becoming 20 in the blink of an eye. The attack did not halt there, however, as Itachi formed a few more hand signs. Katan, Hao Senka no Jutsu. Small fireballs were launched from Itachi's mouth, each one moving with expert accuracy that came from years of experience and training. The fireballs each collided with a single shuriken, setting them ablaze so that the storm of steel was now capable of burning as well as cutting. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The single clone developed in a plume of smoke and pushed its creator out of the way of the storm of steel and fire. A few of the burning weapons pierced the clone's body, vanishing just as quickly as it came as Naruto rolled on the ground. He used the momentum to climb back to his feet and then hopped backwards as he saw Itachi's feet shift. The sound of the shuriken slicing through the air still met his ears alongside the pull of wire. Ninja wire, he thought. The shuriken jutsu. I've seen Sasuke work with that before, but this style of the technique, it's faster. Better. You have no time to be impressed, you hairless monkey. Duck. Kamina and Kurama told him in tandem. He followed their instruction and felt the heat of the shuriken pass overhead. Go left. Right. Jump. Step back 2 paces. Hop left and roll. Get back on your feet and block with your sword. Lean back and go into a backhand spring to gain some distance. He followed the directions of his tenants masterfully, all while keeping his eyes on the ground and away from Itachi's genjutsu summoning dijutsu. The flaming shuriken were swung every which way with every form of the technique that Itachi was capable of performing and then some, but the Raijuu and Bijuu were both able to keep their shared host alive. However, Itachi was not a master of his craft for nothing. He pulled at the wires which were connected to his shurikens so that they circled around Naruto in a dome-shaped fashion before forcefully crossing his arms. The flaming shuriken all flew towards Naruto from every available angle, but Naruto gripped his sword tightly. Wind chakra flowed throughout his body and along the length of his blade as he called upon the techniques of his fallen clan. Uzumaki Ryu, Tatsumaki. He spun like a top and the wind chakra was unleashed from his body and blade. The winds followed his rotation, rising and swirling at a rapid rate to generate a small wind circulation system. The tornado melded with the flames of the shuriken such that it allowed the sword technique to become a flaming twister. However, with Naruto's chakra being the integral part of the fire tornado's structure, Naruto merely caused the technique to swell to the point of bursting. A pulse of fire then raced out towards Itachi, flames also traveling along the length of his wires with the intent of burning him. The S-rank Uchiha would have none of that, however, as he leaped skyward. The raven-haired man then went into a series of front flips to build up momentum, bringing his leg down in the form of an axe kick. Naruto raised his blade to counter the physical attack, wind chakra still humming around the sword. The weapon sliced clean through Itachi's leg, severing his foot from the rest of the limb, but his body suddenly glowed with blue energy. The chakra pulled into a single point within the clone's body before it reached the point of detonation. The Bunshin Daibakuho was successful in sending Naruto flying back, the areas of bare skin being singed due to his natural healing abilities being augmented by Kurama's chakra. He managed to right himself in the air and stab his sword into the ground, tearing a fissure as he skidded to a halt. He then felt movement behind him, spinning around with blade in hand to see Itachi had reappeared behind him. The Akatsuki member was poised to strike and lashed out with a strong kick to Naruto's hand, knocking the sword skyward. "Shit!" Naruto mentally shouted as he was now forced into an exchange of taijutsu with the Uchiha genius. Itachi came forward with a strong right hook to the face, but Naruto blocked it with his forearms before aiming with a right kick to the knee. Itachi shifted his stance to avoid the strike before going into an elbow strike to the chest. Naruto stepped back to dodge, but Itachi had spun on his heels to go into a terrific roundhouse kick that sent Naruto skidding to the side as the attack made contact with his ribs. He gritted his teeth, powering through the pain so he could then raise his arms to block the incoming axe kick from the Sharingan user. The force traversed through his body and into the ground, causing it to shudder before it caved in to form a small crater beneath his feet. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki channeled chakra into his arms and pushed Itachi back, the Uchiha going into a series of backflips to land gracefully on his feet. However, the clan killer's feet had barely even touched the ground before he pushed off to get within the blue-eyed Jounin's range of motion, giving the blonde little time to go on the offensive like he planned to. The Akatsuki member performed a strong right jab, followed by a left jab. Naruto bobbed and weaved under both before he saw his opponent slide a kunai into his left hand from his sleeve. Itachi aimed a stab to the throat, but chakra exploded out from Naruto's body as he took on one of the stances for the kata of the Kitsune no Mai. He unleashed a roar as he brought his knee up to slam Itachi's forearm when it got within his joint's striking range. The Sharingan user's eyes widened in shock as the attack made contact. A resounding crack echoed across the battlefield as the bone was obviously broken, but Itachi managed to lightly toss the kunai and snatch it out of the air with his fully functional right arm, catching it in a reverse grip to then stab it into the Jinchuriki's cerulean blue eye. Time seemed to slow for the blonde as the sharp point of the weapon took on a rather intimidating shine as it reflected the light of the lightning above. Raijuu Arc, Shunshin no Jutsu. Naruto formed the ram hand sign and immediately vanished from view in a swirl of wind and a spark of lightning. He moved faster than any regular Shunshin would have allowed him to. It was nothing close to his father's Hiraishin, but to Itachi and those that were lucky enough to have seen the Yondaime Hokage use the jutsu that earned his moniker, they would have said it was a very close second in terms of speed of activation as well as appearance. He reappeared in the sky where his sword was still in the middle of falling back to earth, the taijutsu exchange between the two shinobi having occurred that quickly, and caught it in one hand before hurling it towards Itachi. Futon de Tapa. He unleashed a burst of wind that served to augment the speed of his sword, while also generating a massive gale that would strike the Uchiha with deadly force. You have improved, but you are still far too young to think you are capable of defeating me with such a feeble trick. Itachi's eyes narrowed before he flung a lengthy piece of ninja wire at the oncoming sword. He swung the blade overhead, causing it then embed itself deeply into the ground, said ground cracking from the force of the impact. The Sharingan user moved through hand signs, his fingers a literal blur before they settled on the tiger hand sign. Katon, Gakakyu no Jutsu. The signature jutsu of the Uchiha clan, and of many a fire chakra nature user, erupted forth from Itachi's mouth. Yellow-orange flames scorched the very air, and the spheroid's intense heat and power was only augmented by the raging winds that Naruto had unleashed upon it. The host of the Raijuu looked on with wide eyes as the fireball rapidly ascended towards him, but he quickly performed his own trademark jutsu. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone materialized in the nick of time, and hurled its user skyward. Another clone then sprung to life as Naruto reached the apex of his first clone's throw, grabbing him by the arm and spinning him around. Once the necessary momentum was built up, Naruto was hurled towards his sword that lay on ground zero. Both clones were lost in a fiery explosion just as Naruto touched the blade. What? Itachi spun around and took off at a rapid pace. It took less than a second, his body literally a blur of black and red as he was already within Naruto's guard. He then grabbed Naruto by the hand to prevent him from drawing the sword from the ground. Naruto glanced at his opponent's hand and, in the spur of the moment, made the mistake of looking up just as the Uchiha was standing in front of him. Crimson irides with spiraling tomo met shining electric blue with vertical pupils. Uzumaki Ryu, Kaminari Shigekiha. Lightning cloaked the sword of the Jinchuriki before it was unleashed as a terrifying burst. The streak of lightning rushed across the earth, tearing it asunder as it slammed into Itachi. The bolt of lightning dragged Itachi along for the ride before it came to a halt at the boulder where the lock seal was located. A powerful explosion of lightning occurred, cratering the earth and shattering the boulders, while also scorching the surrounding grass. A massive cloud of dust and dirt wafted through the air, sparks of voltage sparking from it as if it were like the thunderclouds that swirled above. The dust cloud was quick to dissipate, but Naruto knew better than to think Itachi had fallen from the blow. Then the feathers began to fall. The cawing of the ravens met his ears as the ebony feathers fell around him. HN. Pathetic. Naruto's eyes widened, his head snapping around so fast in the direction of the voice that he probably would have gotten whiplash. The eyes of a Sharingan not unlike his recent opponent's glowed with a menacing light. Ebony hair spiked upwards and made a rather noticeable contrast with his pale skin tone. 3 years and yet you're still the dobe, Naruto. As Sasuke? With Team B. Team B had cleared the forest lands they had been navigating in their quest for the anchor that their designated lock seal was tethered to, but after a while, they had found themselves standing in a rocky wasteland of some sort. Then, to make matters worse, upon finding the massive piece of rock that was their target to destroy, its chosen protector had revealed himself. The man was a very tall, muscular shinobi. He had a distinctive shark-like appearance, complete with pale, blue-gray skin. He also had small, round, white eyes, gill-like facial markings under his eyes, and sharp triangular teeth, much like most of the other members of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. His blue hair was styled in the form of a shark fin. As a member of Akatsuki, he also wore dark purple nail polish. He wore a brown sash across the front and back of his Akatsuki cloak to hold an absolutely massive sword in place, the sword's blade being completely wrapped in white bandages while the yellow hilt, tipped with a pommel in the shape of a human skull, was visible over his left shoulder. He wore his Akatsuki ring on his left ring finger, bearing the kanji for south which was yellow in color. Hashigaki Kisame. Kei and Chojuro uttered. The wielder of Samahata grinned, baring his shark-like teeth to the 2 Konoha Kunoichi and the 2 Kiri Shinobi. Well, quite the young upstarts that are coming out to play these days. Kisame chuckled. And seems like you're one of the new ones. You, the boy who got Hozuki Man gets his sword, are you a member of the 7 Swordsmen now? Chojuro gulped audibly, but nodded in confirmation. That's right. I am Chojuro and the aide to Mizukage-sama. Hashigaki Kisame, you are an S-rank missing nin with the order to kill on sight. Ha ha ha, even with all that stuttering you still managed to get out words of that nature. Threatening to kill me, boy? Well then, if you think you can, then come at me. Kisame's chakra flared and a great pressure acted upon the 3 younger ninja before him. What the hell? Sakura stuttered, nearly falling to her knees. It felt as if gravity had increased 100 times over. This was just an act of showing off his chakra, but she nearly outright fainted when his killing intent was thrown into the mix. The aura of death and bloodlust flowed from the blue-skinned man's body in waves, his predatory grin making them all know exactly what it felt like to be prey. For a split second, the 3 young shinobi could have sworn they saw the phantasmal image of a massive great white shark floating behind the former Kirinin. Its teeth were bared and ready to rend flesh from bone in the most painful way possible. So this is the monster of Kiri. Kito muttered, sweat now tracing the path from the side of his face to his jaw. Kami, this is not gonna be easy. You got a point there, Gaki. Kisame chuckled as he went through hand signs. Since 2 of you are members of my former village, and I got a newbie swordsman here looking to make a name for himself, I'll give you both a little help. Suetun, Sudai Bakua no Jutsu. His body swelled with chakra before he made it undergo nature transformation. What was once raw chakra suddenly pooled within his body as liquid, making Kisame's body swell for a moment. His cheeks puffed out before he unleashed a massive torrent of water from his body. The volume of water was immense as Kisame had literally flooded the rocky wasteland, turning most of it into a lake that was deep enough that they had to stand atop the water's surface with chakra. There. Kisame's eyes gained a glint of amusement, dusting his hands off, as if he had just taken out some trash. All done. The amount of chakra to make such a great deal of the liquid would have been worth Kakashi-san's entire reserve. Chojuro thought as he shakily reached for the dual-handled sword. I've read the reports that said he earned the moniker of the tailless Bijou, but I thought it was just an exaggeration. Can we really win this? Can we even hope to fight this demon? Chojuro. The blue-haired boy turned to his teammate, the taijutsu master, giving him a reassuring grin. Don't let him psyche you out. We were trained by the Mizukage herself, not to mention you got training with one of the most famous blades in the world. We gotta get this mission over and done with, and make Mizukage-sama proud. Chojuro gulped, removing the lump in his throat before nodding stiffly. He gripped the hilts of Hiramakirai, removing it from his back with the intent to fight his fellow swordsman. Fu and Sakura took their own fighting stances as well. So, what do we know about this guy other than that he's S-rank and strong as fuck? Fu asked. Being a shinobi from Kirigakure, his combat prowess when near water is practically godly. He can shatter stone with his fists, and his speed when swimming is unparalleled. No one in Kirigakure can match him in the water should he choose to go underneath the water's surface. Kito informed the non-Kiri shinobi. As for that sword, the sword on his back is Samahata, and is a sword that is wielded by only those who have earned the title of being one of the 7 swordsmen, Chojuro said. Because the Samahata takes the chakra of its wielder in a sort of mutual symbiosis, only those with exceptionally large chakra reserves have the ability to wield it in battle. It is also quite heavy, just like my Hiramakirai, which speaks volumes of Kisame's physical strength. The sword is not one which slices, but rather it shreds and cuts flesh to ribbons. Also, the sword is sentient in a sense. How so? Sakura asked. No one other than the chosen wielder will be allowed to hold Samahata. The hilt is made up sharp scales that can tear apart the skin of a person's hand should they try. Chojuro answered. It is also capable of eating chakra. The chakra can be stored within Samahata's blade, using it as a food source, or it can be transferred to Kisame himself to bolster his own reserves. It is because of these abilities that Kisame had earned the moniker of the tailless Bijou. Being compared to a Bijou? Chome snorted. No human alive is comparable to our power. Fu, take down that fish man and turn him into sushi. That will be the plan, the mint-haired girl replied. So, how do we take him on? We have 3 taijutsu combatants and 1 swordsman. We're all close-range fighters and we're up against a guy who literally turned a wasteland into a lake and is a master of the sword. We'll have no choice but to attack from up close then, Kito replied. As good as he is, the Samahata is still a heavy sword. There will be a small lag time between his swings, and Kisame's sword technique tends to revolve around a one-handed style. He's a power striker, going for wide and powerful swings that will be difficult to block. So we'll have to move quickly then, Sakura surmised. She glanced down at the water they were standing upon with a small frown. Given the scale of his ninjutsu and him having a water nature, it will be rather difficult to close the distance between us. Kisame sighed, growling in annoyance. All right, I think I've given you enough time for your little discussions. If you won't come to me, then I will come to you. Suiton, Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. The 4 members of Team B felt a pulse of chakra race out from the blue-skinned man before the water behind them took a life of its own. 4 small pillars rose up before solidifying and taking on the appearance of their user. The clones then each formed a single hand sign before stretching out their arms in front of them, their hands alight with chakra. Suiton, Seiryuu no Jutsu. The 4 water clones called out simultaneously. The water bent to their will and the 4 teenagers were suddenly encompassed in their own respective spheres of water. Their eyes widened and they immediately held their breaths, but due to the short space of time between their imprisonment and their breathing, they were quickly about to run short on air. Well, this is disappointing. The wielder of Samahata sucked his teeth and shook his head. The pink-haired girl doesn't look like much, so I didn't expect much from her. However, I think the lung capacity of shinobi from my own village would be so poor. And I would have hoped the Jinchuriki of the Nanabi would have put up much more of a fight. The 4 teenagers glared at Kisame through their watery prisons. Their hearing and vision was distorted because of their current positions, but they could tell he was mocking them. The chakra is too dense. I can't make a burst strong enough to break free. Sakura watched as small bits of her air escaped her mouth in the form of bubbles. She gripped her throat, squeezing it in an attempt to trap the necessary oxygen within her lungs for as long as possible. I can't die here. This is the first time I've been out of the village, and I still need to have my rematch with Uzumaki. Kei thought before unleashing chakra from his body. Chakra natures can suck my dick. Water beats fire my ass. Fu. I know! Fu shouted to her Bijou. Simultaneously, Kito unleashed a massive burst of fire-natured chakra from his body while Fu was cloaked in the crimson chakra of Chomei. Both of their water prisons turned red from the intense heat that their bodies were producing, the water literally bubbling as they were brought to a boil. Soon, their chakra outputs surpassed those of Kisame's Mizabunchins, and the water prisons popped like bubbles as they were practically converted entirely to steam. The moment they were freed, they vanished from view as blurs of speed. They reappeared in the spaces between the clones that had held them captive and the ones that currently held their respective teammates. Fu went through hand signs while Kito's fists were surrounded by fire and chakra. Suetun, Mizu no Yaiba. Katon, Goken. Fu decapitated her target clones while Kito's fists ripped through the remaining 2. The 4 clones exploded into splashes of water, returning to the depths from whence they came. Chojuro and Sakura took deep breaths to reclaim the oxygen they so desperately needed. Oh? The shark-like Akatsuki member unleashed a toothy grin. Looks like you won't be as shitty as I thought. You would be surprised to know just how many opponents have been defeated by that simple trick of mine, so that actually puts you leagues above those shinobi. Kisame then began to mold his chakra, his hands moving through the required signs at a rapid pace. And seeing as how now you have a counter to that little trap of mine, let's see how well you handle my other ninjutsu. Get ready! Fu called out. Suetun, Suikoden no Jutsu. The water in front of Kisame morphed into a massive shark that was at least the size of a full-grown elephant. The liquid shark roared, its open maw ready to swallow the team whole. However, Chojuro would have none of it as he gripped Hiramakerii and leaped up to meet the shark. Hiramakerii Kai-ho, Hanma! The blade responded to its owner's will, taking the chakra it was supplied. The bandages around the sword were unraveled as the chakra erupted forth from the powerful sword and morphed into the shape of a mallet head. Chojuro unleashed a roar as he swung Hiramakerii, and the hammerhead slammed against the water shark, right on the tip of its nose. A powerful shockwave raced out from the point of impact, and the water shark was reduced to mere water. He's no Mangetsu, but he's good. Kisame gave a nod of approval to his fellow swordsman. Go! Kito exclaimed. Chakra flooded their legs before they all took off across the waters. Kito was the fastest of them all, so he was the first to reach Kisame. Chakra flowed through his body, concentrating in his right fist as he delivered a strong punch. Urashimaryu, Tekken! The chakra-powered strike was blocked as Kisame held up Samahata. The force of the blow was enough to send Kisame skidding backwards, but Kito felt the force of his strike had been dampened due to Samahata stealing some of the chakra that fueled it. Ah, Urashima! Thought Yugura wiped all of you out with the Kekei Jinkai genocide axe. Well, you thought wrong. Kito's fists then burst into flame before he punched the air. Urashimaryu, Katon, Engen! Fireballs rocketed from his fists towards Kisame, but the 7 swordsman member quickly formed hand signs and countered with his own jutsu. Suetun, Teppadama! Bullets of water collided with the small fireballs and a cloud of steam formed as a result. Haiden Nanabai no Habataki! The Nanabai Jinchuriki summoned forth the 2 wings of her inner demon's chakra. The wings buzzed rapidly, moving faster and faster until it generated a massive gust of wind that split the water partially. The sharp-toothed swordsman was sent skidding backwards from the attack before Sakura and Chojuro came at him from either side to initiate a pincer attack. Chojuro swung low to try and take out the older shinobi's legs, while Sakura aimed high to crush his skull with her fist. Kisame chuckled as the two attacks neared him, but he was not an S-rank missing nin for nothing. He held Samahata high and spun it in his grip so that the blunt-tipped weapon now pointed downwards. He stabbed the shark's skin sword down on Hiromikarii, sending the flounder-shaped blade down into the water, while also raising his free arm upwards to deflect Sakura's punch skyward. Kisame then spun rapidly on his heels, hitting Sakura in the ribs with the flat of Samahata and driving a spin kick against Chojuro's face that had his heel digging into the younger blue-haired swordsman's cheek. Both young shinobi didn't even realize they had been struck until the force registered with their bodies. They flew off in opposite directions, skipping across the water's surface like stones. Kisame dove beneath his self-made lake and swam at high speeds, moving quickly after the student of Tsunade. He quickly outpaced her still skipping form before bursting out of the waters just ahead of her. He gripped Samahata with both hands, his grin widening to the point that it threatened to split his face. No! Fu had flown quickly, traversing the distance between herself and her teammate faster than even she thought was possible. Too late! HRH! He brought the massive sword down upon Fu as the orange-eyed girl raised her chakra exoskeleton-coated arms to block the strike. However, it did very little to stop the attack, and the force of the downward slash pushed her and Sakura down into the depths of Kisame's watery realm. You think you can save yourselves? Let's see how well you do then, Suetun, Gashikuzame. The Suetun master placed his hand atop the water's surface with his fingers dipping just beneath it. Chakra and water moved to his command before 5 sharks made entirely of water sprung to life from the tips of his submerged fingers. The sharks snarled, circling around their prey at a high speed to generate a fast-moving stream that prevented both Sakura and Fu from having freedom of sharks circled, moving faster and faster with the vortex they created until finally, with open maws that bared their razor-like teeth, they struck. With Team A. Naruto's eyes were wide with shock as he looked upon the image of his former teammate. The young man did not look any different from how he did when he last saw him. The same blue shirt and white pants, and even the entire left half of his body was now decorated with the flame-like markings of the first form of Orochimaru's cursed seal. What's the matter, Do? Sasuke asked mockingly. I'm actually surprised. You're speechless for the first time in your life. I wonder if you were the same way when I nearly killed you 3 years ago. You were so close to saving me, but you were too weak to strike me in that final clash. Sasuke's flesh was then covered in the flame-like markings of Orochimaru's cursed seal. The poisonous purple chakra of Orochimaru flowed from the Uchiha trader's body before Sasuke was shown to be in the released form of his cursed seal. His skin became a dark gray, a black cross-shaped tattoo appearing on the bridge of his nose. His scare became black and his lips purple, while the canines of his teeth sharpened into fangs and his hair lengthened to reach his mid-back. The back of his shirt bulged visibly before ripping as the hand-like wings unfurled behind him. You were too weak to ever finish me off because you saw me as your best friend. Sasuke laughed in what seemed to be actual amusement. Pathetic. I too saw you as my best friend, Naruto, but I needed to kill you to attain the power needed to defeat Itachi. I gave you mercy in spite of that, but Orochimaru can only do so much for me. You want to be a good friend to me, Naruto? How about you die for me? Sasuke raised his left hand and the screams of 1,000 birds pierced the air. The lightning of the Chidori shifted from its pure blue to the malevolent black that came with being infected with the cursed seal's chakra. Sasuke moved closer and closer to Naruto's form. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki trembled, and his head dropped so that his hair shadowed his eyes. His hands clenched into tight fists, and he gritted his teeth. Die for the sake of your friend, Naruto. The hand descended like spear, aimed for the Raijuu vessel's heart, but Naruto's hand suddenly came up and gripped Sasuke's wrist tightly. The sound of bones snapping echoed and the Chidori met a swift end as a result. Die for you? Naruto snorted. Genjutsu or not, I'm gonna let you and Itachi know just how I feel about you. I made my peace with you, Sasuke. I made a promise to save you for Sakura, but I also made a promise to someone else. Within his mindscape, Kurama gave a nod of approval. You think I still see you the same way as I did 3 years ago? Don't make me laugh, Uchiha. Believe me, I will try my damned hardest to break you to bring you back. Like I said at the Valley of the End, I will break every bone in your body to do so. However, if you prove to me that you are beyond saving, I will harden my heart. So, if it comes down to it, one way or another. Naruto pulled the illusionary Sasuke closer to him, and a Rasengan swirled to life. I will kill you. He plunged the spheroid of rotating chakra into Sasuke's body, shredding his flesh to the point that his arm easily came out through the young Uchiha's back. With that, the genjutsu was shattered and Naruto stood before Itachi. The elder Uchiha stood with a legitimately shocked look on his face. You have really lost that much faith in Sasuke, Naruto-kun? Itachi asked. It's not that I've lost my faith, Itachi. He was like a brother to me, so I can't let him go entirely. But Ero Kyofu told me before that I would remain a fool my entire life if I kept hoping that I could save Sasuke. I'm being realistic, something that literally had to be pounded into me. Naruto blurred forward, standing directly in front of Itachi, and delivered a strong and swift jab to the stomach. Itachi's eyes widened, coughing up blood as his body folded over from the force of the blow. He flew back, slamming into the boulder that bore the lock seal with enough force to leave an indentation in it. That act had ended the activity of the lock seal that would have protected the Akatsuki's base, but the blonde remained active. His killing intent flared and Naruto charged forth once more, pushing the raven-haired man further into the stone as he crashed his forearm against the older shinobi's throat, crushing it and ending all speaking capabilities for the Uchiha. If anyone else had witnessed his fight with Sasuke 3 years ago, it would have been almost exact reenactment of one of their positions during said battle. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki then reached forward with his clawed hands, gripping the Uchiha's skull tightly. Kurama's chakra outlined his body like a flame, and his eyes shifted to burning crimson as he stared directly into the Sharingan with the eyes of the Kyuubi no Yoko. I'm not a child anymore, and I will do what is necessary. With a sharp twist, Itachi's neck snapped. His head fell forward before it fell out from the Itachi-shaped imprint it had created, crumpling to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Naruto took a deep breath and calmed his nerves, the chakra of the Kyuubi leaving his body. Naruto, that is incredibly foolish of you, Kakashi said, his visible eye narrowing. What were you thinking that made you believe you could handle Uchiha Itachi on your own? Like I said, something was off. He was weaker. Chio and Shinji were silent as they watched the altercation between the two Konoha jounin, but all eyes were focused on the fallen body of Itachi. Or rather, what should have been. Itachi's body suddenly underwent drastic physical changes and revealed itself to be a very dead, but unrecognizable face. And apparently it wasn't even Itachi to begin with. What the? Kakashi muttered. So, he defected to the Akatsuki. Chio muttered. He was probably the spy that allowed Sasori and the one who kidnapped Gaara into the village. You knew him? The Kagaya clan member asked. He was a member of the council that advised Gaara. The lavender-haired puppet mistress sighed. But there's nothing we can do about it now. We should go back and regroup. On that note, the group of 4 quickly moved to meet with the others. With Team B. Haruno-san. Fu-san. Chojuro's eyes widened as he watched the sharks begin to strike at the two kunoichi. The sharks lashed out, and the blue waters began to dye red as the sharks dug into Sakura's flesh. Fu was well protected due to her exoskeleton, but with being trapped underwater she couldn't focus on keeping her breathing in check, protecting Sakura and defending herself simultaneously. I'll get them out. Distract Kisame, Kito ordered. Chojuro nervously nodded before he moved towards Kisame. Samahata and Hirumikarii crashed together with resounding impacts that shook the waters. Right now to get those two away from the sharks. The water's moving clockwise, so a counterclockwise rotation should nullify it. The Kaimon is always active in my body due to my nintaijutsu style, but this is too powerful for just one gate to be open. Kito took a deep breath in preparation. He concentrated on the flow of his chakra and then pushed it forth towards the second gate that blocked his chakra. Kyumon, Kai. Chakra flooded Kito's body, and he felt the rush of power that re-energized his body. He leaped into the air and he reared his right arm as he got into alignment with the raging streak of water that Kisame created with his sharks. He allowed gravity to take its hold on him as he neared the surface of the rotating waters. He then let loose his arm in the form of a powerful palm thrust, chakra rotating in a counterclockwise manner as he slammed it down against the water's surface. Urashimaryu, Raise and Shino Kakusha. A powerful shockwave occurred as the chakra-empowered strike unleashed the spiraling chakra, nullifying the water vortex and also ripping apart the sharks. The moment the waters began to calm down, Fu burst out from beneath the currents with Sakura in her arms. The emerald-eyed medic Nin quickly set to work on healing her wounds as similarly colored chakra coated her hands. Skin and underlying flesh were stitched back together, and the only sign that she was injured in the first place was shown from her blood-stained clothes and skin. Thanks. No problem, Kito replied. Now come on, Chojuro has been holding off Kisame by himself. The three got back to their feet and ran towards the blue-haired guardian of the Mizukage. He swung the Hiramakerii in a downward vertical slash that was easily blocked by the taller shinobi before he was pushed back with little to no effort. Kisame brought his own blade down upon Chojuro, forcing the bespectacled boy down to his knees, the water rippling violently beneath his feet as he blocked it. Kisame then spun, Samahata knocking the boy back before its wielder took a large step forward, not letting Chojuro rest as he swung Samahata in an upward slash that sent the younger swordsman skyward. Chojuro gritted his teeth, his arms shaking from blocking the powerful strike. I'll cut you to ribbons! Kisame roared as he leaped after his prey with a predatory grin. Gah! Chojuro screamed in pain when Samahata bit into his shoulder from Kisame, bringing the shark-skin sword down upon him. Blood stained his clothing before he rocketed back to the surface of the water at an angle, skidding across it at a speed that parted it until he came to a stop when Sakura caught him. Kito and Fu rushed past them just as Sakura began to heal him. The two heavy hitters reared back their fists and brought them down upon the swordsman, but the S-rank shinobi grabbed Kito out of the air and swung him against the Nanabai Jinchuriki. They both rolled across the waters as Kisame swam after them as quickly as a barracuda. He emerged from the depths and kicked Fu in the face before unleashing a back kick that made the Urashima clan survivor's chest feel as if it were about to cave in. Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu. A powerful dragon of water rose forth from behind Kisame as he went through all 44 hand signs in as little as 3 seconds. The dragon's yellow eyes glowed with power before it rushed after Kito, but the taijutsu master was quick to recover and counter as his body was cloaked in golden voltage. Urashimaryu, Yari! He punched the incoming serpent right between the eyes and lightning lanced forth from his knuckles, spearing through it as its name implied. The water dragon fell apart before the bolt of lightning continued through the air towards Kisame, but the blue-haired man fell beneath the waters to avoid it. He returned to the surface and blocked the swing of Hiramakerei's hammer form, but the force of the strike sent him rocketing through the air. He recovered quickly and blocked the downward vertical slash that came from Fu's own water sword. He easily pushed her back, knocking her arms into the air to leave her open, but Fu quickly let go of her blade of water to bring her hands together in the tiger sign. Haiden, Renpungakure! Kisame released a cry of annoyance as Fu exhaled a cloud of blinding white powder from her jaws. Haiden, Masatsu Hibana! She then gnashed her teeth together, and a few sparks of chakra jumped out. It took only the slightest touch as the sparks ignited the scale powder and generated a powerful fiery explosion. Fu was knocked back from the force of her own combo, but she landed deftly on her feet, watching the cloud of smoke and steam dissipate slowly. All eyes looked at the obscured figure of Kisame Hashigaki, but their eyes widened when they saw his body. The entirety of his cloak and some of his pants had been burned excessively from the explosion, but his flesh that had been recently shown to be burned and blackened was shown to be stitching itself back together. Chakra flowed from Samahata to Kisame, steam rising from the rate of his regeneration. Oh, you nearly got me with that one, Nanabai. Kisame's body shook lightly as he chuckled. The chuckles then escalated in volume and intensity as the cries of amusement became full-blown laughter. You young ones are a lot more fun than I was expecting. Now come. Show me more. Show me what you're capable of. He summoned forth a water shark that completely encompassed Fu in its shadow. The marine life form of liquid slammed into the Jinchuriki with terrific force, dragging her across the water and smashing her through one of the boulders of the formerly rocky wasteland. The mint-haired Jinchuriki used the momentum of her rolling form to climb back to her feet, chakra blazing to life around her arm and taking the form of her Bijuu's horn. Haiden, Horan Busta! She stabbed her arm forward and the jutsu stretched forward like a lance with the intent on running Kisame through. You never learn. My sword eats chakra, and it especially enjoys those of the Jinchuriki. He swung his blade and true to his words, the sword took the chakra into its form like a tree's roots would to water. However, the attack served its purpose to distract Kisame as Chojuro rushed forth. Hiramikarii Kaihu, Tai 2. The chakra erupted forth from the blade and lengthened to exceed the length of even Samahata. He swung it down upon the blue-haired man's form, a shockwave racing out from the point of impact with Samahata. The solid chakra was eaten, but Chojuro was unrelenting as he continued his attacks. He gripped Hiramikarii's hilts and pulled at them, revealing the ability of his sword to become two separate swords. He swung one in a downward diagonal slash before spinning on his toes to go try and rip into Kisame's belly. Both attacks were avoided before Chojuro went into a double downward vertical slash, sparks flying as the blades dragged across the edge of Samahata's sharkskin, before he went into an upward vertical strike. Kisame swung Samahata in a wide arc that sent Chojuro spinning as he was knocked aside from the strike. But Kito took over and fire blazed across his body as he lashed out with a strong right hook. A powerful explosion occurred as the fire-natured chakra ruptured under Kito's command to send the blue-haired man flying back. Shinaro! Sakura roared as she gripped a piece of rock that was jutting out of the water. Her gloved fingers dug into the hard earth, cracking it as she ripped it free from the rest of whatever structure it was a part of. She hurled it through the air with the strength Tsunade taught her to use before she charged chakra into her legs and followed after it. Kisame's eyes widened as the massive piece of earth slammed against his body, but the moment it did, Sakura was directly behind it with her fist already crashing into it with enough force to shatter it. The chakra that was charged into her arm was expelled and served as a way to send the Akatsuki member flying back even further to meet Phil, who was waiting with her fist clenched tightly, the chakra of Bijou flaring from her body. She bent her legs and then moved up through her knees, providing more momentum to her arm as a deadly uppercut dug into Kisame's spine and sent him skyward to meet with the two jounin of Kiri. Kito's body was sparking with lightning while Hiramikarii was released and took on the image of an axe head. Hiramikarii Kaiho, oh no! Urashimaryu, Kai taken! Both attacks slammed into Kisame's body. The Akatsuki member's eyes widened in pain and shock, his organs rupturing and causing him to cough up a great deal of blood. He rocketed through air, and in a great sense of timing, was positioned just above the boulder that contained the lock seal they had to break. Sakura Haruno was already descending towards him, her leg raised high into the air and chakra being focused at the tip of her heel. Tsutenkyaku! The axe kick was brought down with terrific force upon Kisame's airborne form. Time seemed to slow down for the older shinobi before the force registered with his body. He rocketed to ground zero and slammed into the boulder, the rock shattering into tiny pieces just like his sternum had from Sakura's blow. The four shinobi gathered, giving each other victorious smirks as they panted in exhaustion. With the source of chakra that supplied it now being dead, the massive lake that Kisame had generated was now lost to the world. The water levels quickly reduced to zero, vanishing as if it had never been there in the first place. However, the feeling of victory that encompassed Team B was left a bit hollow as they looked upon the fallen missing Nin. They released gasps of surprise as his figure shrunk and changed, and the man that was regarded as the tailless Bijou gained the appearance of a normal man. Broken and dead, but still normal. Who the fuck is that? Kito asked with a raised eyebrow. Have we been fighting a clone this entire time? Sakura asked. Fu shook her head in disbelief. That's just not right. And maybe it's a form of consciousness transferring like what the Yamanaka clan in Konoha uses? Chojuro suggested. We'll focus on that later, but for now, we need to get back to the Akatsuki's base entrance and regroup with the others. The other three nodded in agreement with Kito's words before they moved out. Akatsuki base. Did you break the lock seal on your end, Goldilocks? Fu asked her fellow Jinchuriki. You insult me by thinking I wouldn't, Mosshead. Naruto replied with a confident smirk. You two can flirt later. Let's move on and break this boulder, Kito told the two. Naruto and Fu turned to the Kirigakure Taijutsu master, blushes adorning their faces. Nobody's flirting, they exclaimed. Ah, to be young. Chio chuckled as she earned icy glares from the demon hosts for her comment. Just shut up and punch the damn rock, Sakura. Fu grumbled as Sakura covered her mouth with her hands to hide her giggling, an act that was one of futility. Once she managed to calm herself down, Sakura habitually pulled at her gloves as she prepared to punch the large boulder that stood between them and the Godain Kazekage. Shinaro! Sakura charged and delivered the ferocious right jab. However, she came to a sudden halt. Sakura's eyes widened along with the rest of her team's when the water churned beneath her feet and a deafening sound echoed across the river canyon they were in. Everyone move! Kakashi ordered as he quickly snatched up Sakura and attached himself to the canyon wall on the opposite side of the Akatsuki base entrance. The others followed suit as they watched the massive river continue to move as if it were enraged. The roars beneath the currents grew in volume until finally the sources of the roars were visible to their eyes. The massive beast that had once been sleeping beneath the sands of Suna had emerged, swinging its spiked tail like a club before shattering apart the boulder and most of the canyon wall in one swift and powerful strike. If there were any Akatsuki members inside the base, they would surely be caught entirely off guard at seeing the powerful beast standing before them. They would be even more so as a pillar of water rose up before the face of the spiked shell-bearing monster. A loud roar that blended with the hiss of a serpent met everyone's ears, and if it was possible, their eyes would have widened even further as they caught sight of a massive emerald-scaled serpent. The massive river serpent was extremely long, a fact that was showcased as its body easily wrapped itself around the other kaiju's limbs and throat, and still had a large amount of tail left to spare. Its four limbs each had 5 claws that were the same shade of ivory as the razor-sharp teeth that lined its gaping jaws. 4 massive horns, 2 upper horns and 2 lower ones, that were akin to spikes jutted out from its head. The upper horns were larger than the lower horns, and spikes of a similar appearance to the horns stretched across its lengthy body from the base of its skull to the tip of its tail. Its eyes were a bright gold, vertical pupils making a stark contrast within the glowing orbs. That's the creature that came out of the sands after the Kazekage was kidnapped, Chio said as she recognized the spiked shell-bearing monster before her. Wait, so it wasn't the Akatsuki member who caused that destruction in Suna that we saw? Fu asked. No, and we kept it quiet because firstly, no one would believe a word about a giant monster attacking our village. Naruto and Fu glanced at each other upon hearing that. Well, they both drew out, but Chio ignored them as she continued to talk. Besides, it wasn't your concern, so we kept the fact that a strange beast had risen out of the sands, killed hundreds with merely appearing, and then vanished beneath the sands once more to head out into the desert, Chio replied. If I were to venture a guess, the explosives used in the Akatsuki that fought Gaara, he probably woke it up. It probably wasn't too happy about that, and tracked him back here, Naruto said. Seems the kaiju are not as extinct as we believe them to be, Kamina stated more to himself than to his host. Do you have any idea what they are? Naruto asked. The one that resembles a turtle of some sort, the kaiju known as Anguirus. It's supposed to have made its territory in dry and arid lands when the kaiju were still walking the earth, but to find it this far out, especially among the river lands of Tawa no Kuni. Given that this is Manda's territory, it would make sense as to why it would awaken to strike at Anguirus. Manda? But isn't that the name of the snake's boss summon? Indeed, but this is the original Manda. A powerful dragon kaiju that guards the rivers of the world and makes them its home. As you can clearly see, Manda is very territorial just as all kaiju are. You're going to have to try and fight them both off because it seems that this place is their battleground. If you don't stop them now, the Kazekage isn't the only one who will die today,